Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things, and welcome to episode 41.
Ben, I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to talk about Cary Grant.
Whoa, why?
No good reason, but have you ever seen the movie North by Northwest?
Was that a Alfred Hitchcock movie?
It was an Alfred Hitchcock spy thriller kind of thing.
Maybe once a long time ago. All I remember is him being chased by a biplane.
This is a very classic scene. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But the reason that ties into episode 41 is Cary Grant's character was being chased by that biplane on Highway 41.
Oh.
So North by Northwest is interesting because I remember seeing it one day. This had to be years ago. And I decided that I had to watch it because it is a classic. You read about these things on the internet and they would say, oh, North by Northwest. Apparently this is one of those like textbook cinematographic. I don't know what the real word is.
Like if you're in film school, you're going to watch this one.
Exactly. Like Film School 101, the teacher's going to come in on day one. He's going to turn on North by Northwest, and that's what you're going to do for the week. So I have 3 kind of interesting facts about North by Northwest. You ready?
Cool. Yeah.
All right. So the first one is actually meta. So you're going to appreciate this. The original producers of the first James Bond film actually wrote the part and intended the part for Cary Grant because of the role that he played in North by Northwest.
Cary Grant was supposed to be James Bond.
And Cary Grant was all on board, but he backed out when they wanted him for multiple films. He was 58 at the time, and he wanted the stipulation that he was only on the hook for one film.
He didn't want to sign up for a franchise.
Yeah, he honestly said he was too old at the time.
Okay, well, they did good with Sean Connery.
I think they did just fine. Second, you've already mentioned that you may have seen it before in the past.
Uh-huh.
I encourage you to watch it again. If for no other reason than this is one of the most ripped off pieces of film in history. And when you watch it, you'll recognize so many scenes that all these other movies just kind of take and use and kind of almost quote in their movie. Like the biplane scene is a classic where I don't know how many rip-offs of that scene I've seen where somebody's standing alone in a field and then a plane starts flying at them from the distance and they slowly turn and start running away from it.
Okay, so like the scene where Indiana Jones and Sean Connery are running down the beach in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and there's that like German airplane coming after them, that's supposed to be an homage to North by Northwest?
I would say yes.
Huh.
And I've seen 100 different farcical versions of this. There was a Scrubs episode where JD was being chased by a remote control biplane in the same North by Northwest.
Okay, I could see that being a very deliberate, direct reference to this.
Yes. There's also the other scene where they were climbing all over Mount Rushmore, and they're being chased by the bad guy, and for some reason Cary Grant decided the best way to get away from him was to climb down onto the face of, I think it was Lincoln. It was hanging off of his nose at one point in the film's climax.
Okay.
Spoilers for North by Northwest, everybody. So if you ever see a movie where people are, for some reason, on Mount Rushmore, fleeing from danger, this is an homage to North by Northwest.
Why were they in South Dakota? Whatever.
I'll
have to watch it to find out.
Okay. The third thing is not so much a fact as an observation. You've got to watch this movie because in this movie, Cary Grant's character is wrongfully accused of murder or something. And so like the police, the FBI, like all these government agencies are trying to track him down and chase him and arrest him. And he's on the lam for like 4 or 5 days throughout this film.
Uh-huh.
Here's the thing. Throughout these 4 days, like he is like a classic 1950s, 1960s like businessman. And everybody that does anything for him, looks at him, says hi or whatever, he tips them like $1 or $2 cash out of his pocket.
Uh-huh.
He keeps reaching in his pocket and he pulls out this wad of cash and tips him a couple of bucks. Like everybody. And like it happens so much in this movie that I have to ask, how much cash did Cary Grant have on him when he went on the lam?
Awesome.
Because he's tipping everybody all the time.
This is a common problem in cinema. You know, like in Thor Ragnarok when they have those M16s and they must shoot like 1,200 rounds out of a 35-round magazine.
Oh, those were at least 50-round magazines. Come on, Ben.
But I always get distracted by this kind of thing in film when there's something that obviously has a limit, except for there is no limit. The movie can't be bothered with that kind of detail. He stopped by an ATM in 1950 and got singles. I don't know.
He had. I was starting to pay attention to it halfway through the movie. It had to be hundreds of dollars in singles that he was handing out, and that so he just had to have had that on him at the beginning of this. That makes no sense to me. Blows my mind. I haven't had cash on me since, I don't know, 2016.
I have weird reasons I have to have cash, like to use the snack fund at work or to tip the maid in my hotel room or just weird stuff, you know.
Your Snacko is behind the times. I would have set up a PayPal account for that thing first day.
You know, you laugh, you make that as a joke, but I have seen places where there are PayPal account Snackos.
Which is, I mean, that's just genius. You're going to get more money if people can pay digitally.
And it probably helps with shrinkage, which can be a problem.
I mean, yes, shrinkage can always be a problem, but I don't think we're talking about the same things.
I'm talking about theft, Josh.
Oh, theft. Of course. That makes sense.
Yeah, I remember, it's particularly in our unit, I remember the cops getting involved because somebody was stealing either food and or money out of the snack fund in the unit you and I were in together when we started our careers. So even in the military, there's a lack of honor sometimes.
Man, as a Snacko, I just kind of ate that. Oh, look, there's enough money in it today to reimburse me for the purchases this time. That's a win.
Yeah, but if it was getting depleted too much, eventually it wouldn't be self-sustaining.
Yes, and then the Snacko pitches in the difference. I mean, that's their job.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was deployed and I had this transitional time where I was in this giant tent that could house like 100 people, and it was in Afghanistan. I was on night shift, which meant I had to try to sleep in there in the middle of the day. So there were these like swamp cooler fans blowing on us that just made more noise than cool air. It was like 100 degrees in there. Every time someone would open the tent flaps, it was like a laser beam in your eyes, you know, just bright sun in your face. And I was in there one night and I went to the shower and I came back and someone had stolen my shaving kit and my iPod was in there. And this is not a nice iPod. This is like a, 1998 iPod.
Oh, so it was like the size of a small book. It
Yeah.
had 8 songs on it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember being just really frustrated about this and being kind of disillusioned. Like, we're in the military. We're supposed to like have each other's backs. Why would someone in the military steal from someone else in the military? And I had a friend who was in the Army. He said, like, it's not personal. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, there's only one thief in the Army. I said, what does that mean? He says, there's only one thief in the Army. Everyone else is just trying to get their stuff back.
All right, so that's indicative of how terrible Army culture is, that they have such an elaborate and funny saying about it. It's like, oh yeah, everybody gets all their stuff stolen all the time, and that's just the way it is.
Right, you're just stealing stuff because someone stole from you. It's just hazing.
It all balances out at the end. It's fine.
Only one guy stole somewhere sometime, and that started this chain of dominoes, and everyone else is just trying to get their stuff back. Okay.
Yeah, there's a 2-star general at the Pentagon somewhere that's stealing the 1-star's coffee in the morning.
If I ever meet that one thief in the Army, I've got some strong words for him.
And some of those words are going to be at 4 letters, and they're not going to be goat.
I have some follow-up from last time. So as I like to do, sometimes you and I will talk about an idea, and I like to learn some more about the idea and educate our audience on it. So last time I mentioned the idea of a management principle that I refer to as the 80-20 rule. If you want to look it up or find books about it, it's called the Pareto principle.
Oh, fascinating. Let me put that on my reading list. Hang on. Let me type it out. Pareto principles. Got it.
The Pareto principle is also known as the law of the vital few or the principle of factor sparsity, but my personal opinion is to debunk it every chance I get.
Because you believe everybody is just wanting to do their best all the time.
Right. 100% of the contribution gets 100% of the work done.
I feel like it's more of a 90-10 split, but that's okay. We have different outlooks on these things.
I mean, there's a mathematical basis to it, and it kind of relates to, a standard distribution and those kinds of things. But yeah, if you want to learn more about that, it's called the Pareto principle.
Actually, now I might actually look. I was doing it facetiously earlier, but I might look it up if it's based in actual math, just to throw it back in your face, because your cheery, rosy, pink-colored goggles that you look at the world through cannot argue with normal distributions, Ben.
Well, speaking of rosy-colored goggles, there's another management principle that sounds similar to this one called the Peter Principle. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
The idea behind the Peter Principle is that people don't get promoted for what they're capable of. They get promoted for what they've done. So everyone gets promoted one level higher than they're capable of.
Oh, I have heard of this. I have quoted that to people because it makes such perfect sense.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I can't make it to Lieutenant Colonel. I've maxed out.
That's an unrelated thing. But no, you can identify the people that get caught in this trap, because I remember I had, when I was still in the military, I had a tech sergeant who was just the sharpest, fast-burningest guy, ran his shop like clockwork. He was great. And then he pinned on master sergeant, and 6 months later I was giving him an LOC because he just would not make that transition from technical expert to manager.
What part of it was hard for him?
He wanted to keep pushing the old tech sergeant out of the way and type his emails for him.
Yeah. And sometimes there's no way to know that until you actually give someone the chance.
Yep, and he got the chance because that's the way the military works. Whether you like it or not, you're either moving up or you're moving out. Yeah. And turns out he got one level higher than he should have been.
So I was re-listening to last episode, and we were talking about our jobs and stuff we had, and I realized there's something I want to ask you about. So as we've started this podcast together, we've increased a little bit in visibility in that, we've gotten listed on platforms and reviews, and we have a website and that kind of thing. And somehow that has attracted a little bit of something I'd only experienced once before that you probably experience all the time. In fact, I know you must experience it all the time because I sent some of it to you and you just blew it off like it was nothing. But to me, it's kind of a big deal. And that is being solicited as a sole proprietor, as a potential source of revenue for some business that caters to entrepreneurs.
Yes, I find those very annoying. I don't see why you texted it to me like you were excited about it, and I was like, dude, this is the kind of crap that's going to fill up your life, just suck all of your time away.
There's a classic film from the 1970s called The Jerk with Steve Martin. Have you seen it?
That is a classic movie. Of course I've seen The Jerk. I don't need anything else, but I need this.
Yes. So you remember the scene where the new phone book gets delivered to his house and he looks himself up in it. He's like, here I am. I'm somebody. I'm in the phone book.
Yes.
That's kind of what it feels like for me to get solicited by people, trying to contact me as a sole proprietor. Like when I was pruning palm trees and people were contacting me like that, I realize now in a very jaded kind of way that they just look at me as another way to make money. They're not trying to help me grow my business or improve or anything like that. Whatever. I'm just part of their business model. But at the time, it felt like Navin Johnson looking his name up in the phone book.
It's just so cute. Because we've spent so much time throwing flyers at everyone and telling our listeners to tell their friends and getting listed on all these things across the internet. And then somebody somewhere finally saw that we were a thing and sent you an email, and you just got so happy and giddy about it.
I'm like, yeah, I'm a legitimate podcast. I'm being solicited.
Somebody picked up one of the flyers I threw at them.
Well, do you still get these kinds of things for providing pool services?
No, actually, I do not. I shut off my website, and I did for probably 6 months after I quit the business. I would just refer them all to my brother. And one interaction with my brother as a pool guy, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, I don't know why I was dealing with Josh before. I could be dealing with this guy. He's a way better pool guy.
Yeah, I feel like he could do anything, and he would just always come across with this just supreme air of self-confidence.
Yeah, my brother lives in that handsome bubble we talked about a couple of episodes back.
Yeah, I remember that.
No offense to my brother, who may or may not listen, but just good on him. Everything goes his way, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. All right. So I want to do a little bit of Ben versus bureaucracy because I had an experience this week. I knowingly blundered into an area that I had a feeling might go poorly, but I also told myself a best case scenario story that allowed me to wander into this area. Do you want to know what it was?
Ben, I told you not to go back to the Wendy's with the manager to fix their app. That's just not going to work.
Okay, so as has been documented in this podcast in the past, my teenage daughter has difficulty driving safely.
She hit a parked car, Ben.
She hit another parked car, Josh.
Oh, this is a second parked car.
She hit a second parked car and totaled the second vehicle. The airbags didn't deploy this time, but the damage was just as devastating.
Okay, hang on. The first time she was texting and going around a corner at night, so I can understand like totaling a car. Like, was it the same blind corner again? What?
No.
Did you not take her phone away the first time?
No. Okay, so we live at the end of the cul-de-sac where our property is shaped like a wedge, which means in the back it's gigantic and in the front it's microscopic.
That's exactly what you want in a property.
Right, but that means in front of our house there's only really like one place to park a car in the street before you start encroaching on the neighbors.
Okay.
So our landlord came over and he had a contractor with him, which meant there were 2 cars in front of our house, and the contractor decided to park at the end of our driveway. My daughter went out and got in the car to go to work. She opened the garage door, put it in reverse, and went down the driveway without even didn't look in the rearview mirror, and just crashed right into the contractor's truck.
Okay, but he wasn't like the contractor's truck wasn't in the driveway.
It was at the end of the driveway.
It was at the end of the driveway, but it was still like in the street, right?
I don't know the specifics of the location. I don't know if it was backed into the driveway. But anyway, we're only talking about 10 feet worth of difference of distance.
Well, this is important for me because if it was parked on the street in front of your driveway and she hit it, that means that she was going into the street where there is moving traffic and kids. We're
on a cul-de-sac. I said this already.
I know. It doesn't matter.
I know. You're right. There could have been children. That was the very first thing I said. You could have gone backwards and run over a child because you didn't even check.
And there's enough children running around the rich household. I mean, it's just a statistic probability.
Definitely crossed my mind. Okay, but we're not here to pile on my daughter. I'm trying to lead into a different story.
I am. I'm here to pile on the daughter.
I know. You've done it already.
Yeah. Okay. Go. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So there. All right. I need to say something else. This is probably bad at husbanding, so we're mixing Ben versus bureaucracy and bad at husbanding. I'm sure any married couple develops versions of this, and that is that there are certain things that you are interchangeable on, and there are certain things that you very much consider to be the other person's responsibility. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Like, there's jobs that anybody can do and it just needs to get done. But then there's jobs where she does it and I can't do it. But if I have to do it, I feel like upset about it, like kind of grouchy, like this isn't my job. Like I shouldn't be doing this.
Yes, that's exactly what was going on here. Cars are my responsibility. Oil changes, gassing them up, routine maintenance, tires, anything like that, all of that is 100% completely my responsibility. So, and I'm aware of that, and if I'm going to be deployed for 6 months, like the very last thing I do before I walk out the door is make sure that all the cars are in pristine, perfect working order. And if I come back to visit, like I did over January, I was on the ground for like 40 hours. And during that 40 hours, I spent 4 of them doing auto maintenance. Like that's how much this is my responsibility.
Okay.
So when my daughter crashed and the insurance company totaled the car, my wife went into like freak out mode because this is not her job.
This was the only car you guys had at the time, right? Because the other one was... Yes,
because I went and I brought the third one with me. So we're down. We went from 3 cars to 1 in the space of 4 months.
Wow, that's not a good track record.
No, it's really not, and I'm glad I brought my car with me. But okay, so my wife is freaking out because she doesn't want to have to go through the experience of buying a replacement car without me there. And I can't really think, I'm imagining, her walking around with me on like FaceTime, trying to talk to an auto salesman at a car dealer. And I'm thinking, this won't do. And then I had in my mind a flashback of a television commercial. And sometimes we're very transparent about this in our minds. We're like, sometimes I see a commercial, I'm like, that commercial is not for me. And I won't let it influence me, or I wasn't vulnerable to that product anyway. And sometimes I see a commercial and I'm like, that product is for me. That commercial appealed to my psychology, and I will buy that thing because of that commercial unabashedly, unashamedly, without reserve. There was this commercial I'd seen on TV. And I don't normally watch TV, but I've been seeing it lately because there's a TV right in front of my desk where I work that's always on the news channels. So in between commercials on the news channels, there's this commercial for this company called Vroom. Have you seen any commercials for Vroom?
I don't watch live TV either, so
Yeah.
no, I haven't.
Okay, Vroom has postured themselves. Their commercials are so appealing to me. They're very short, and they start off with like a man and a woman, or just one or the other, in like this really skit-like, over-fraught version of a car dealer. In one case, it's like a 3-ring circus, and there's bright lights and flashy things and bears on balls and people on unicycles and stuff, and they're like, look at the new car, woo! And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the person that's sitting there with their head spinning, looking around at all this craziness, it's like they're on a revolving door that turns 180 degrees so that the whole world rotates around them, and now they're at their house, and it's peaceful and calm, and a tow truck pulls in front of their house and drops off a car and drives away.
I can see that appealing to a lot of people in this day and age.
Yeah, and there's other versions of it. There's one where you're like in there and there's like this high pressure sales environment, and they're locking you in the room and they won't let you go, and they're trying to upsell you on everything, and you again the couple looks just completely overwhelmed, and then the world turns and they're back at home and the car gets dropped off. I could tell from this one that idea very much appeals to me. The same way I've abandoned broadcast television and have fully taken up streaming-based media and almost completely done away with like advertising in my life for the most part. I am willing to do that in other areas of my life. And this is one where I think I am willing to change from the traditional model of selling cars at a cost. And I'm willing to accept quite a bit of cost. If that means I don't have to haggle and I might pay $1,000 more for my car, I'm okay. That's worth $1,000 to me in peace of mind.
Wow. Okay. Well, and in this situation, like even if you were, I can see eating that increased overhead just because, like, how's it going to work any other way? Like you said, you're going to have your wife walk around on FaceTime. It's like, now hold the phone closer to his face menacingly so I can yell at him.
Yeah. So back to the Ben versus bureaucracy piece of this. I know that this is a startup company and that they've allured me with some enticing ads, but they can't overcome the fact that they still have to do a lot of the same things a car dealer does. They still have to run a credit check. They still have to get me to sign a contract. They have to deal with like the proof of insurance, license and registration, all the same bureaucratic stuff you'd have to at any car dealer. So, and I'm aware that a company like this is some big internet startup that has a lot of like starter capital from that they're flashy, but underneath it could just be like two guys in their garage with a website.
Mm-hmm. So we have all these pieces, but we don't know how they quite fit together just yet.
Right. So I'm like, all right, this could be the solution to the problem where my wife doesn't want to have to go to the dealer, and this is a way I could take the weight off her shoulders by helping out by buying a car online. So I'm willing to give it a chance. So I go on this website and I use their search engine, and it has a little bit of polish, like the kind you would use to get your business plan approved, but there's some cracks around the edges, just little things where the pages don't quite load up right, or it doesn't show all the information you need, or it thinks it's remembering something. At one point, it marked one of the cars that I'd looked at as that I'd purchased it. And it still shows up on my page if I log in their website.
Well, to be fair, we're probably, you and I, not the best audience for critiquing a website just because we're so tuned into what a website can and can't do.
Yeah. So, but I was willing to give it a chance. The price was right. They had, models. And as I started to dig into it, like, where's this vehicle actually located? They're like, well, that's at our Atlanta location and we're in Texas and that kind of thing. And okay, whatever. I don't, this maybe in the background, this is just some car dealer that's trying to develop a web presence that's not associated with their local brand. Whatever, I'm okay with it. So all you're telling me is I sign all this stuff digitally here in Florida and you'll deliver a car to my wife in Illinois. They're like, yep. I'm like, okay. So I signed all the stuff. I bought the car. It was roughly a 1-for-1 replacement in size and form factor of the car that my daughter crashed, which is a Toyota Sienna, but 10 years newer, with a lot of the features that we wished we had in those intervening 10 years. For instance, backup warning systems that might have prevented my daughter from crashing into the truck. So I buy the car. It comes 3 days earlier than they promised, but they don't really tell me, and they called my phone number instead of my wife's, even though I told them to. So there's just like a little bit of roughness surrounding the transaction, but it's still moving in a positive direction. So they come, they drop off the car at my house. Initially, we thought it might come on like a semi that had like 20 cars on it, or on the back of a flatbed like on the commercial. How it actually worked out is some local guy drove up in it and then just walked off the street and disappeared. He must have got an Uber or something. I don't know what, but my wife was like, that was weird.
That sounds incredibly weird. Like, did she have to sign something or get a receipt? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just sign for the car. He just drives up in the car like an Amazon guy. Then he gets out, hands you the keys, and then disappears.
And he gets on his little hoverboard and scoots away.
Yeah. So up to this point, very satisfied with all of this. The price, the interaction, the amount of things, the dealer stuff I was able to not have to do, all of that. And then my wife goes out and gets in the car and turns the key and nothing happens.
But it just drove up to the house.
I know. This is Murphy's Law in action.
So she has to turn it away from her. She's aware of that, right? You turn it clockwise.
It's the same car we had. And she's mad at you right now for what you just said.
For presuming that she didn't know how to start the car.
Future Alicia is mad at past Josh right now.
I'm just making sure these are the simple troubleshooting steps that you start with. Did you try turning it off and turning it back on again?
Josh, it is well documented on this podcast. How do you feel when you call up cable tech support and they want to ask if you've rebooted your router?
Yeah, I'm super pissed at them for asking me those stupid questions.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't ask my wife if she knows how to turn the key in a car. Even if she didn't, I don't have any right to ask her that question.
All right, fine. I'm not going to be any more.
She's a college graduate. She has 2 degrees. I'm not asking her if she knows how to turn the key in a car. So she calls me up, and she's in meltdown mode. Just like they dropped off this car, and it won't start, and I don't know what to do, and this is the worst thing ever, and I already got all these other problems, and there are a lot of other problems. I already got all these other problems, and this is the worst thing ever. And meanwhile, you're texting me, and I'm bad at like telling you, hey man, I can't like talk about magic right now because we're having this crisis over this car that just got dropped off in our driveway.
Oh, is that? Yeah, because whenever I text you, it's about magic.
Yeah, so I wanted so badly for this car buying experience to be as smooth as it looked on the commercials. And now I knew I was going to have to get involved with like finding out how well set up their customer support structure is and all that kind of stuff.
You wanted it to do what it says on the tin.
Yes, very good use of past bad at English.
Yeah, I'm patting myself on the back right now.
I wanted what it said on the tin. So, long story short, it was not a good experience. It came with their way of assuring you that not having a local dealer, kind of the way of if you go to an online-only bank, is you go to any ATM you want and we'll reimburse your ATM fees. Well, in this case, it's you can get maintenance anywhere you need to, and if it's still under warranty, we'll cover it or whatever. It was still under the manufacturer's warranty. So we had it towed to a dealer, and it just turns out that someone, whether it was Vroom or it was the previous owner, had replaced the battery, even though the car only had 17,000 miles on it. I don't know why still that they had to replace the battery on a car that only had 17,000 miles on it. But the cables were hooked up poorly or something, and it was causing electrical problems, which is why the car wouldn't start.
That makes sense.
Ultimately, it took about 24 hours to get it all worked out and cost us $145.
That's really not bad.
I know. And I'm very much the kind of person that's just willing to take $145 in the shorts, except for the fact that I'm immediately getting these automated service emails from the online company saying, how was your car buying experience? And I want to be like,
oh, you sent those emails to the wrong person, Jack.
Yeah. I want to be like, stand by, if you're going to take the risk of doing this in a different way, you need to be ready to stand behind what you're doing so that my poor wife isn't panicking over the fact that she's got a broken car and no place to go to hold someone accountable for it. Like, they could have just dropped a lemon off on our doorstep and been like, sorry, sucker, thanks for the $30,000. Here's your broken car.
Aren't there lemon laws in Illinois?
Yes, there are, and all of that's in place, but that's a lot of bureaucracy that doesn't get a one-car family their car that's running. When she's thinking about piano lessons and my daughter getting to her job and the kids getting to school and getting groceries and all that kind of stuff.
Wait. The daughter who has totaled 2 cars is still driving to her job?
Josh, we need to stop talking about that. Yeah. If you value your friendship with my wife, you'll stop talking about that.
I do. I do.
Okay. All right. So, long story short, there's no end to it. The company still hasn't come through, and I'm right at the point where I'm just willing to write off the $145. It's like less than 1/10 of 1% of the purchase cost. Whatever. It costs $145 more than I thought. I got a car with 17,000 miles on it for a relatively good price, dropped it off at my house in just a few weeks, and it's working fine. But if they send me one more gosh darn customer satisfaction email, I am going to do what you just inferred that I would do and give them a piece of my mind, and I hope it goes straight to the CEO of this new startup.
It absolutely won't. It'll just be one of those things that goes to a no reply box, and I think it's like, oh, this is a 1-star review. We're not putting that on the website.
Okay, if there are any corporate entrepreneurs trying to start a national website out there, listen to me. Listen to me. If you are trying to create a new business like this and get people like me to be early adopters, you have got to safeguard your customer experience so that I turn into a source of word of mouth. I am $145 and a nice phone call away from recommending this to all of my friends. Or you can keep the $145 and I will tell everyone I know never to do business with you.
I mean, that's a good summary of exactly what happened. Yeah. I have no facetious, sarcastic, snarky comment to come back with. Yeah.
So that's Ben versus bureaucracy. I'll let you know if they actually send me a check for $145. They better.
We're going to keep this one on the board.
It's about the principle. It's just the principle of the thing.
Well, it's definitely not about the interest for $145. Little accounting joke for you here on the podcast.
All right. So I said there was a lot of things going on, but my eldest son got engaged to be married this week.
Mazel tov. Congratulations.
And I ran a marathon.
Also, congratulations. All right, so you're going to run fewer marathons and you're going to have children getting married. So congratulations on the marathon. That's a big deal.
Well, on this podcast, I told you one of my goals on this deployment was run a marathon. And you're like, I'll believe that when I see it.
And I got the screenshot and you sent me the 26.2. And I mean, good on you. It was a random Wednesday afternoon. Who runs a marathon after work on a Wednesday?
Okay, I'm going to sound like Forrest Gump here, but it won't be the first time in this podcast. I got home from work. I changed into my running shoes. It was like 60 degrees and a slight breeze, and I started running, and I felt really good, and I just felt like running. I just kept going.
That's funny, but this is the first marathon you've ever run, correct?
Yeah.
What was the longest run that you had done previous to that?
13.1.
Okay, so what's the longest run that you've done on this deployment before this marathon?
A half.
Okay, so then you had to have some people pick you up at the hotel to drag you into work the next day on a gurney? Were you able to
got
move?
up and went to work.
That's good on you. When I ran my first marathon, I couldn't move for 2 straight days.
What part of you hurt?
Everything from the waist down.
Yeah. I was a little bit sore, but the only thing that really felt injured was the muscles in my feet, but that's tolerable.
Have you bought good shoes? You have to have good running shoes if you're going to put a lot of miles on them.
Yeah, that was the thing. I didn't even wear my good running shoes. I just had on whatever random ones I picked up, and I just felt like running. So
you can really mess up your back doing that, sir. I'd recommend for long runs you need to have good quality running shoes.
Didn't hurt my back at all, but my feet are killing me. Still working on that.
Well, I'm very happy for you, and we completely glossed over the fact that your oldest son got engaged.
Yeah, so he's going to get married. He's going to get married in June.
Oh my! Okay, lay out the timeline for us because I want to know when he got back, when he met the girl, and when he proposed to her.
Okay, so there's a weird cultural thing that I don't think I have the time or the energy to unload on you, and that is the fact that they met in California while they were both missionaries.
Oh, so they've basically been dating for this entire time.
Absolutely not. There's a huge cultural taboo about this, and there's also a little bit of a
so there's a forbidden fruit angle too. This is getting spicy.
Yeah, well, okay, I don't know how to say it. There's this. It's almost like a cultural embarrassment. Embarrassment isn't the right word. I'm trying to think of it. It's like if you went to the Air Force Academy, but you got I don't know what's considered the most dubious degree you could get at the Air Force Academy, like physical education.
I don't
Can
think
you get a physical?
actually, you can get a physical education degree. We knew somebody that got a physical education degree at the academy, so we're just going to leave it at that. But
Okay, all right. So
it's like going to the academy and telling everybody you're there not to be a pilot.
right. Yes. Yes. So, oh, you went to the Air Force Academy. Are you a pilot? No, I'm just a PE major. Yeah.
So it's like a faux pas, really.
It's kind of like that. Oh, you guys, how did you meet? We met on our missions. Aren't you supposed to not date when you're on your missions? We didn't date. We just met, and we didn't start dating until after we were both home, which is 100% the truth. But you'll always have to explain that away if you're talking to other members of the church.
Oh, no, it's against the rules to date while you're on the mission. So we went straight to banging each other's brains out.
No, that is so wrong. So when you're a missionary, you're teaching people about obeying the law of chastity, and our interpretation of that is that no sexual relation until you're married. And my son and his fiance are very much committed to that path of behavior.
Which explains the March betrothal and the June wedding.
Yes. There's a lot of tension that exists, and I can testify from firsthand experience. When you are waiting until you get married to have sex and live together, it feels urgent.
Ben, I'm gonna take you someday. Like you're gonna hit your tipping point and you're gonna break. And I'm gonna take you to a bar and I'm gonna introduce you to beer and we're gonna have a long talk about all the things that are better on this side.
Okay, but as you know, and I don't know if we've said explicitly on this podcast before, my wife and I met, dated for 2 months, and got engaged, and were married 2 months later.
Oh, I'm aware of that timeline.
Yes. So when my son comes to me and he says, this girl that I've known for 18 months and we've been dating for a year, we're thinking about getting married in 3 months, that sounds like an order of magnitude greater than what I did. What position am I in to criticize that timeline?
What's really funny about this is Nicole and I didn't know each other very long before we had gotten engaged.
Yeah, but you had an Air Force shotgun wedding, which is a completely different thing, and I still want to do a segment on.
Yeah, and one of the things I appreciate about you, Ben, is your betrothal and engagement makes ours look downright cordial.
Traditional.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so they're engaged to be married. They're planning it for June. It's going to be great. It'll be a happy time. What a wonderful life milestone. So, yeah, lots of life milestones. Lots going on for me this week. What's going on for you?
Well, hang on. When can I expect to save the date?
So I believe my son and his fiance are listeners to this podcast. So hopefully, if you haven't offended them with your banging each other on their missions comment, they will get you added to the invite list for the 4th of June.
I was completely expecting you to turn me down in a very awkward way, and I was just wanting to put you on the spot. If I actually get like a save the date or an invite now, I'm going to feel really awkward.
Yes. I gotta see.
See, this is key to these awkward situations. Is you refuse to accept the awkwardness, you double down, and you put it back on the other person. That's how you get out of them. Well, you were complaining about Vroom, completely justifiably. That sounds like a nightmare scenario. I had a little bit of, I don't know if it's Josh versus bureaucracy or just bad at parenting. They kind of blend. It's a Venn diagram where these intersected. And
yeah,
I thought you'd
kind of like mine was also bad at husbanding.
Yeah, there you go. This one's going to be a lot shorter. We got, my wife and I, email today from the school district, from the school principal, rather, of our son's elementary school, and said, hey, parents, there is mandatory state standardized school testing that your third graders have to take. And you have to take it in person. And it's going to be administered across the district at 4 different locations. You need to register for a time. It's going to take up to 4 hours. Your kid needs to bring all these materials, including a Chromebook, which apparently is how the test is going to be administered. And
did they issue them to you, or did they expect you to buy them?
no, they were issued to us, so that's not a problem.
Okay.
Like, we have all the materials, but it just seems weird to me that we would take a remote learning device into the school to continue to remote learn physically present.
Okay, sorry, I failed to grasp the irony of that. Yes, that's very ironic.
But they also says like, oh, and they need to bring like a reading or a coloring book in case they finish. They need to sit quietly in their little space because we're going to observe all of the social distancing requirements. Well,
so what, are they worried that third graders are going to cheat on tests if they do it from home?
Apparently, that it won't stand up to the proctoring requirements, or I don't know. But here's the thing: is immediately I pulled back from this. Like, no. Like, my first question was, what are the ramifications if we don't? Because here's the deal, Ben. My kids are learning from home because my son is high risk. Why would I break a year's worth of quarantine for a state-mandated standardized test?
Okay, who did you ask that question to? Because bureaucrats hate when you ask that question. What are you going to do to me if I resist?
I asked my wife, who was sitting at the computer next to me, because I was working at the time.
You weren't talking to a school administrator or something?
I was not yet, no. But I told her, like, this is my first question that I would email back to the school administrator. What are the consequences? Because my son might just be sick that day. Like, you can't make us do anything. It's a free country. Anywho, my wife dug into it, and it turns out there isn't any academic consequence. This is a requirement that the state has to meet, like, certain testing levels. Like, they have to test 95% of the student population in order to hit these target metrics to continue to get this avenue of funding or whatever from the federal government.
Yep.
And so when we realized that's what was going on, I laughed heartily and said, "Oh no, we're not going to do that."
Okay, so Josh versus bureaucracy is just blowing it off. Once you found out there's no consequences to not doing this.
Oh, I mean, it's not just that there's no consequences. The way that this email was phrased is that the state is requiring the kids to be in person in order to, I don't know, guarantee attendance or proctor it or whatever. That is, I don't know, it really pushed a lot of my buttons because, like, we've been as a community, as a state, as a country, as a people, working so hard to try to make sure people are safe through this unprecedented global pandemic. Oh, but hang on, we're going to lose our federal funding, so throw all of that crap out the window.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I know everywhere I've been in as a former school teacher that there are a lot of things associated with, like, you have to have a certain percentage of attendance in order to get all of your state and federal funding, and so it's on you to make sure that the kids are there and police truancy and that kind of thing so that you ensure learning is taking place. But when COVID hit and everyone's at home, all those laws are still on the books, but now they have to make, like, either temporary or permanent exceptions to them to try to find other ways to count if students are actually being educated so that they can continue receiving their funding. Part of that's just measuring attendance, but apparently another part, at least in the state of Arizona and probably other places as well, is participation in standardized tests that are used to validate effectiveness of learning that's happening.
Yeah, I get what they're for, but they're failing. Here's the thing, Ben. Not only is Arizona the 48th state in the union to be formed as a state, we are also number 48 in public education. So,
hey, how balanced?
Yeah, it's weirdly symmetrical, and
really 40.
I don't know if that's exactly
I've
true.
been in 3 different states that all claim that title of being 48th: Oklahoma, Mississippi, and now Arizona. I think that's the kind of thing that politicians like to say to their constituency to try to get money.
All right, you do the thing that I normally do.
They're like, we're third from the end. They're like, well, if we said we were last, it would be easier to verify, so we won't tell them that lie. How do they measure it? What's their way of knowing this?
Man,
I'm really dubious about this, only because I've heard it before in different states.
Okay, I'm looking at a study from, admittedly, this is from 2019, so it's not super up to date.
That's recent. That's way super up to date.
Arizona is number 40 for public education. So yes, Ben, technically you are correct, which is the best kind of correct. But still, hang on a second. 40 out of 50, we're pretty down there in public education.
Sure.
So if my son is the kid that stops him from getting this extra federal funding, like, how much worse are we going to get?
Yeah. This is very indicative of your approach to driving through drive-thrus.
Is it?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Like, yeah, the whole system would break down if everyone did what I'm doing right now, but it won't break if I'm the only one that rebels, so I'll do that.
I somewhat disagree in this case because I wouldn't mind if everybody broke this. Because if everybody broke this, that would be clear indication that the system is broken, not the people.
Yeah, sure. They'd have to come up with another way to do it if everyone stayed home.
Exactly.
So another way that we try to solve these kinds of problems are with technology. And one of the things they're doing is like, well, we have this high stakes testing that has a very sordid past because it's also tied to like teacher bonuses or tenure, those kinds of things. And there've been cheating both on the student's part and on the teacher's part because the school's funding is in jeopardy. There's the stakes are very high, which means that the possibility of cheating is high, which is why there's all of the requirements for having the students be present in person because they just can't mitigate all of the risks any other way. However,
I get that, but the underlying assumptions now are broken. Like the fact that you're having these problems and having to build and duct tape all of these extra administrative burdens on top of it to try to get your broken system to work is indicative that the base level assumption is flawed.
Yes. So here's this thing. I just found out this week, I was browsing some news stories and I found out that some very brilliant software engineers had said, well, hold on. There are ways that we can validate remotely. And politicians are rightfully go, tell me more. And like, well, what we could do is we could turn on their microphone and turn on their camera, and by hearing their voice and their breathing and seeing how close they are to the screen and some computer metrics that are pretty reliable, we could give you a great degree of confidence that the person who said they're taking the test is the one taking the test, and they're not getting up and leaving or having someone else sit there or something like that.
Oh, Ben, okay. That's 2 steps from Skynet monitoring us through our Google
you are
Chrome.
Absolutely right, and this went straight to that place in more than one way. One, it's like a horrific privacy intrusion. And 2, apparently it's showing a high degree of failed multiculturalism.
Oh, accents get completely thrown off. Facial recognition keys get thrown off.
Yes, exactly. So like, unless you're white and from Idaho, it's like failing. It's basically kicking people off and giving them Fs on tests when they were sitting there doing their best.
I'm going to refer you back to the book 1984.
Oh yeah.
There's a scene in this book where the first thing this guy is required to do, he has to turn on his TV, and there's an exercise program that he has to participate in. And at one point, he started slacking and staring off into space, and they called him out by name on the public TV.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to give you a better one. You remember RoboCop from the 80s?
The old one, yeah, the good one.
Yeah. Okay, so you remember the scene where they're doing the demo of the like mech bot that didn't have a person inside, and it walks into the room and they're like, and it points its guns at the guy, and everyone's good natured because they don't realize how they're all about to die, and the robot says, "Verify yourself," or something like that, and the guy says it to him, and the robot repeats the command like it didn't get what he said. And then it starts loading its weapons and pointing at him and stuff, and he's repeating the disarm command, and it's not listening.
Yeah.
And then it like shoots 1,000 holes in him, and he falls out the window. Yeah, that's apparently what's happening to these students that are taking these tests. That's what they feel like. You know, that I'm sitting here, I'm at the computer, I'm trying to take the test, I'm telling the computer that I'm here, and it's saying I'm not, and I'm going to fail. And then they cry, they're under stress, they do poorly on the test. It's horrific.
Oh, this sounds like the exact solution that will be adopted by the U.S. public education system.
Look, we did it. We can still satisfy the bean counters that don't want to pay for education funding because students aren't in school.
That's just, everybody, we all just need to come together and get rid of, this is one of those lies that we tell ourselves to make society go. We need to throw this out the window. Everything you learned before high school is, not everything, I guess, but like, a vast majority, like a large percent, the primary reason that elementary and middle school exists in America is for free daycare.
I won't argue with that too much. However, and I think this is a good transition to our next segment. I think one of the fundamental values of the Bad at Magic podcast, even though we've never stated them explicitly, is about being curious about the world around you and trying to learn new things. I think that's something you and I share in common.
Okay, sure.
So And I think that's an important aspect of the daycare system that is the American public school system. That at its heart, any individual thing like, say, just to pick a random subject of no particular relevance, trigonometry.
Trigonometry is extremely relevant. What is wrong with you? You use trigonometry on a report. I use trigonometry all the time. Never mind. Forget it. Man, people badmouth trigonometry. Trigonometry is great.
Say, for instance, trigonometry, just to pick something out of thin air that has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't really matter if you know it or not, but if you're by going through that, you're going through the learning experience of the scientific method, of being curious about the world around you, about understanding there's relationships between things, and turning people into lifelong learners. So along the lines of being lifelong learners, I want to introduce a new segment on this show, and that is, I saw online on a website that I like, they had created a new physical real-world product of something called critical thinking cards from the makers of yourlogicalfallacyis.com.
So yes, you bought these decks of cards, and it showed up in the mail, unannounced and unexplained, and I immediately fell in love with these cards. They came probably a few days after the end of the impeachment trial for our 45th president. And having watched like almost every minute of that trial, Ben, like it felt so good to then read these cards and be like, oh, I can identify a bunch of examples of these.
So it has a lovely amount of numerical symmetry to it. And half the deck is logical fallacies, and the other half the deck is biases. There are 24 of each. And so I think, and I intend to continue doing the podcast, that we can each week do a new one of these. And so this week, let's start with a logical fallacy. And this week, our fallacy is straw man.
Ah, yes, the straw man. So the idea of the straw man is, and I don't have my cards in front of me, so I'm pulling this from my memory. The straw man is that you set up a weaker version of the argument that you're trying to topple because it's much easier to topple the weaker version. And therefore, by extension, I clearly have toppled your more superior and more rounded out argument as well.
Misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. And I think when people hear some examples of these, it just becomes very apparent that if you say, let's say, for instance, that we were talking about the issue of taking standardized tests to validate school funding. If we say that you say you don't want your kid to come to school, I say, why do you hate education? Josh is the kind of person that is against validating that our schools are effectively teaching our children. He thinks we should just give money to schools without knowing whether or not they're actually teaching our children the things they need to learn or not.
My counter straw man to that is my son is high risk for the coronavirus, the current pandemic that's going through. You want him to go to an unsafe environment for something that is not strictly required. Why do you want my son to die, Ben?
All right. We're very good at using the logical fallacy of the straw man. So that is our, we'll call this good at thinking. And we'll talk about being critical thinkers. And I think the ability to identify the straw man fallacy is that when you can recognize it in action, then you can deconstruct it. And particularly for the straw man fallacy, I think you just need to say that, of course, people's positions can't just be distilled down to a single, easy to topple point of view. It's much more complicated than that, and you need to actually engage on the issues at hand.
I have really loved logical fallacies for a long time because when I first learned about them in college, and you're able, if you keep them in your mind while you're listening to people talk, you can identify the places where people use these logical fallacies strategically to try to influence you, or to try to change your opinions, or get their ideas into your head. And I feel like understanding how people can use these as tools to manipulate you make you more defended against them.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't think you necessarily, I don't want to do this in the spirit of just giving people a zinger that they can use to shoot someone down, but just a way to deconstruct and maybe even recognize that kind of thing if you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, if you're using logical fallacies to back up ideas that may or may not actually be representative of your opinion.
Yeah, or being fair to your opponent's opinion.
So while we're on this topic, I don't want to stray too far, and I know we've got to get moving on. There is one thing, there's a CGP Grey video where he has a very short clip where he talks about how people a lot of times will mix up the things that they think with who they are. And that can cause you to defend indefensible positions or to be very passionate about things that maybe at the core you don't really agree with if you were to look at it objectively. And so he made this explanation where you are a person separate from the ideas that you carry around in your head, and the ideas can always change with new information. So he summed it up as, if you always want to be right, you always have to be willing to change your mind.
I like that. I'll find that clip and put it in the show notes. Before we transition to our main segment, I want to introduce Bad at English. And I did a last-minute audible on this because I realized there's a fun one we could do. So, Josh, as a parent of younger children than me, I want to ask, because I think this is one of those regional ones that you don't normally see maps for, like we talked about pop versus soda versus Coke. What does your family call the little plastic prosthesis that you give to a small baby so they can simulate the sucking motion and soothe themselves?
A pacifier.
Pacifier. Well, that's the one you use?
That is what my wife and I use. I think the children would use the term BB.
Okay. Pacifier, BB. Are you aware of any others?
No. I don't think I am.
Growing up, my family called it a plug.
Well, yeah, I can. After the fourth kid, it is just a plug.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, the baby's crying. Where's her plug? Boom. Plug the hole and the noise stops coming out.
That's the thing. I don't like that term because there's multiple orifices you could use to plug with. I mean, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, well, it got me thinking of this because in WandaVision, which we're going to talk about for a few minutes, they actually use a pacifier. They use a different word to call it. But I like how Vision makes a joke about it. He says he puts them in his ears because he can do that phasing thing. So he comes out with a pacifier in each ear. And he's like, it still had the desired effect, if it was to stop the noise.
That's funny.
Anyway, the British don't call it any of those things. They don't call it a pacifier. They don't call it a plug. They call it a dummy.
A dummy?
Yes.
That's offensive.
I know. They have lots of things there that are offensive like that they don't even realize are. And they call it a dummy. I wouldn't even know, except I was around British people and their babies, and they're like, has anyone seen the baby's dummy? And I was like, what the heck are they talking about? And then they pulled out a plug and stuck it in the baby's mouth. They're like, oh, he's calmed down now. He has his dummy.
Oh, like, you missed a golden opportunity. Has anybody seen the baby's dummy? Yeah, his dad's right here. God, he's in the room.
Yeah. So, Bad at English today is dummy, which is what the British call a pacifier.
I don't know how often that one's going to come up in conversation, but I'm glad it's in my brain now.
All right, so for our main feature today, we are going to talk about WandaVision. And I think it behooves us, Josh, because we've never done it quite this strongly or this recently, to give the strongest of strong spoiler warnings.
People, if you are hearing my voice and you like the MCU and you plan on watching WandaVision, but you haven't gotten there yet, seriously, you need to stop listening to the podcast and go watch the show and then come back. Because we are going to talk about it at great length. We are going to spoil it. We're going to talk about every aspect of it. We're going to talk about the meta aspect of it. Ben's going to tell you things about the producers you wish you had never known. I am going to go into such fringe meta comic book nonsense that it's going to make you sick. So seriously, if you don't want to be spoiled for WandaVision, or probably Star Wars, you should stop listening now.
All right, good. Very good spoiler warning. Okay, so WandaVision was only 9 episodes. I saw a counter of it online that said they totaled in length about 6 hours. That's not fair at all because the runtime of these movies on Disney Plus, there's a good 20% of them that's just end credits. I don't know why they have like all the French and Turkish credits at the end there, but
I'm also starting to get sick of the Marvel Studios opening logo, like the like you see at the beginning of a movie. Like if you're watching a blockbuster film and that comes up and it plays for it feels like 2.5 minutes that it goes on, like that's fine. I can't.
It's like 30 seconds.
I can't. It's still too long. It feels way too long at the beginning.
No,
of the TV
they need to take a page out of Netflix's book and come up with a 5-second version.
Yeah, definitely. If they're going to be doing these shows like this, Marvel guys, you got to back that thing off.
Yeah, there's a lot of overhead. So I did a calculation where I went through and counted up the runtime of them. If you take off the as seen previously and all the credits on the end. And the actual content of the totality of this thing is just slightly over 4.5 hours.
Which is still good. That's 2 feature films.
Yes. All right. So the way I want to approach this is let's do our meta and overview kind of stuff, but I don't want to give like a plot overview. I kind of want to go through it episode by episode. And the reason I want to do it that way is because it was very deliberately structured so that it would kind of unfold as you received it.
Well, can we talk about that first before we go into the episode by episode breakdown?
Sure.
So the format of this show. I have to do a generic little spoiler because the idea of this was it opens with Wanda and Vision in a TV show. Like, it was black and white. It's like 1950s. It was ripping off of Bewitched, essentially. It looked like the opening credits and the sequencing and the music. It was very
Bewitched was set in the 60s. This is like I Love Lucy.
Oh, is that okay? That's my bad. I haven't watched Nick at Night in a few decades, so I'm not up on my old timey TV shows. But the idea here is that episode was I Love Lucy, and then the next episode was Bewitched, and the episode after that was the Brady Bunch or something.
Brady Bunch, yeah.
So anyway, every episode, everything changed a little bit. The house got a little different. All of the furniture and things upgraded. They went from black and white to color in episode 3. They went from standard to widescreen formatting at one episode. Like, it kept changing as the episodes went on. So, which turned out to be somewhat important to the plot, but not really. But it was allowing them to play with the format and do different things that you would not be able to get away with if you were watching this on the big screen in a movie theater.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love that you brought that out because this was some producers and some brilliant writers and directors realizing the strengths of their format. You know, the small screen isn't just movie screen light. That they actually have some things that they can leverage that are superior to the movies in a television format, and they leverage those and use them.
We talked about this on the Mandalorian review, but I had the hypothesis that we're going to see more and more of these kind of epic scale TV shows with these high level IPs. And this is kind of the first one we've seen where they didn't just do short movies every week. They like you said, embraced their format, recognized its strengths, and really leveraged it to tell a thrilling story. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to tip my hand here, Josh. I loved this. I freaking loved it.
Excellent.
It was so good. It single-handedly increased the cost of Disney Plus by $1 a month.
I'm going to keep paying that. Like, there were multiple times during these episodes where I was literally on the edge of my couch seat, like leaning forward, jaw open, and just making like little girl sounds because I was so excited about the things that were taking place, to the point where my wife was getting sick of watching the show with me.
Yeah. So this obviously is not the first time that Marvel has attempted to dabble in the world of television. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are over a dozen different Marvel properties that have already done this, but they've all been through a different wing of the Marvel businesses that I don't fully understand, called Marvel Television. This one was not done by that group. This one was done by Marvel Studios, the same unit that made all the movies.
And it shows.
It does show. Also, they allowed a hefty budget. Supposedly, they spent like $25 million per episode, and there were 9 episodes, which is probably the reason for the increase of $1 in the subscription cost of Disney Plus. They also hired their big name stars instead of like the smaller substitute proxies for the big name stars, who reprised their role. Apparently, Kevin Feige, the executive producer that kind of manages the overall like Marvel Cinematic Universe phases and interrelated story continuity, had a hands-on role for this one. The writer, Jack Schaefer, was also involved in writing Captain Marvel, which shows a lot in this one. This one, if there are any movie it relates the most closely to, it's probably Captain Marvel, and for the
sword side of things.
The sword side of things, and Age of Ultron for the Avengers side of things.
This show, this entire series, was directly informed by the movie Age of Ultron.
Yeah. Now, I did not realize, and they made sure to point it out to us, that the name Scarlet Witch had never been used in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up until this property came out.
I'm so glad you brought this up. Yes, because this goes back to,
because we all call her that.
Yeah, yes, but they have never said those words on the big screen. And they were not allowed to. All right, so this is one of the things that I was on the edge of my seat when they said those words it was either the finale or the one before that.
It was the one before that.
I was like, this is a huge moment because this is just indicative of all of the contractual and legal shifts that are happening in this IP that are so exciting. Back in the 90s, when Marvel, the comic book studio, was almost bankrupt, they were looking to make quick cash, they sold off a ton of their IP to anybody that was going to buy it. This is why, for the longest time, Sony had rights to Spider-Man and nobody else did. This is why Fox has the rights to the Fantastic Four and nobody else could get it, and all the X-Men. Scarlet Witch technically fell under the X-Men umbrella of things. Fox owned that IP. MCU wasn't allowed to use it at all. I don't know what handshake they did to have Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, which is Pietro, her brother's character, in Age of Ultron. Something major had to happen behind the scenes for Fox to allow them to use that IP in the MCU. But now, since Disney has acquired Fox, because that's what you do when you have all the money, they are allowed to actually integrate these universes in ways that are very, very important, because the X-Men... I'm going full comic book nerd on you, and I'm sorry. I'll dial it back.
Yeah, no, I'm digging it. That's why I got quiet. You're telling me a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know. Go.
So the X-Men in Marvel Universe are a huge, huge player. They play enormous roles. For the longest time, Wolverine was a member of the Avengers. Ben, you look me in the eye and tell me that you don't want to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
I totally want to see that, but Hugh Jackman says he's played his last role as Wolverine.
I get that. Hugh Jackman's getting too old, but and honestly, he's too tall. Wolverine is 5'2" in the comics, and that's what he should be in the show. It informs his character why he's so surly all the time. It doesn't matter. Having the X-Men, there's so much rich storyline that exists there that corresponds and overlaps with the Avengers, that now that Disney has access to all of it, and it seems like they're going to treat it with the dignity and the respect that it deserves. Just the way that they did WandaVision makes me so hopeful for having these great storylines coming.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. So in a series where they were very much making a point of creating a world where you had a simulated television show and then a fourth wall break where they would kind of maybe look at the camera or recognize that they were simulating a life that wasn't real. Somehow they managed to do something I swear I've never seen before in the history of cinema, and that is a fifth wall break. It's like we have the four walls of the thing we've created here, and we've gone outside of that, and then we're going one step farther to say, hey, attention everyone out there that's been calling her the Scarlet Witch. We've never used that term before in the history of all of our movies we've produced, but now we're going to use it.
All right, so we have to do a quick plot synopsis. Scarlet Witch goes crazy. She creates this basic pocket dimension where she enslaves an entire town in New Jersey and creates this magical barrier on the outside of it. Anything that goes into this town gets sucked into this fantasy world that she has built for herself, which is these television shows.
But you're skipping ahead to the fifth episode.
Yeah, because but we have to explain that's what's going on in order to...
Well...
So the first handful of episodes, yes, they are shot like the classic shows that we were talking about. 3-camera sitcoms, very fixed camera angles. Clearly, they're 2-dimensional sets that don't have they don't have a background. All of that, and then each one changes as we go. And then there's moments, like in the very first episode, they had some dinner guests over, and it's shot in that same sitcom-y way that just feels so 1950s sitcom. And then one of the characters says something that pisses Scarlet Witch off, and he starts choking to death. And the music gets intense, and the camera angles completely change and go full cinematographic, whatever we said earlier.
The cameras change, the music changed, the laugh track stops, everyone starts getting halting, and it feels different.
The special effects that they used for all of Vision and Wanda's magic to that point were very oblique, cel-shaded, nonsense that you would see in the old-timey stuff. Then in that particular scene, all of the special effects were in full-blown, high-level MCU, the highest budget you can get style. It was this clear break that let you, the audience, know that, yes, we're doing this fun 50s sitcom romp, yay! But there is some other crap going down under the hood that is so intense.
Okay, I am thrilled by what you're describing right now because I had the exact same experience. That they were leveraging the fact that you know what a 1950s sitcom looks like and feels like, and you get in the rhythm of it. Like you're just watching this thing and the laugh track's going and it's kooky and there's all the weird social interactions that feel old-timey and outdated, and then something happens that's not quite right and it's like a record scratch. And they're leveraging the fact that you know what a 50s sitcom feels like, and now that something's gone wrong, it gives you this little hint that something's going on here. And I love, this started coming out back in January, and they only released the first 2 episodes. And in the first 2 episodes, you don't get any hint at what's actually going on. So you have all these questions swimming around your head, like, why are we here? What is happening? What time is this? Why is Vision alive again? I thought he died. What is this in the timeline in relation to the rest of the MCU? And you're asking yourself all these questions, and they're just feeding you little tiny hints that aren't quite telling you for sure.
Well, and they do it, and this is where we're talking about how they're leveraging the format. This is one of the ways that they do it. Because like you said, you get in that 50s sitcom routine. And even if you're not as clued into how 50 sitcoms work, when they break a camera angle, like if it's not one of those fixed 3 camera angles that you've been seeing this whole episode, like you feel it. Like you may not recognize that this is why the scene looks so out of place, but you know.
They weren't beating you over the head with it. They were just kind of letting you marinate in the different feel of it.
They were leveraging the format to impart emotions and tension. And like the emotion that
it was brilliant.
Into,
it was brilliant.
It was a perfect use of the formatting in order to drive that home.
I also like, and maybe you don't realize you did this, but there were some assumptions when you go into this. Like, I didn't go into this thinking it was going to be like watching another movie that was about the same character, that was going to be about something completely different. Like, Kevin Feige and his team at the Marvel Studios have given me the confidence that I can go into a new Marvel property, and instead of wondering if it's going to have continuity with the rest of it or not, I can assume that it will.
Yes.
And so instead of trying to figure out if this is something else or not, I just have to figure out how it fits into the big picture.
Well, and that's a huge strength when you think about it. Like, how many Spider-Man movies have you walked into where it's been completely rooted?
Yes, or Batman is another great example.
Yes, like so every time you go to those movies, you just have to assume you're starting from scratch. Marvel has earned it. You walk in there and know everything that has happened in every movie before this is canon, and it affects
and it matters,
and it informs this plot.
Right. So the fact that Vision's here, it's okay to go, why is Vision here? He died
gruesomely, like horribly.
That's an important question to ask, and it matters. And that does away with so much like backstory and stuff that a normal television property would have to do that they don't even have to do. They can just draw from Age of Ultron, draw from Endgame, draw from Infinity War, all those things, and just dump you right in the middle of this mystery that you get to figure out. And I was thrilled by figuring out this mystery. Oh my gosh, it was so cool. So at the end of the first episode, they give that little thing where they cut from the 4:3 ratio to a wider ratio, and you see a bunch of high-tech modern computer stuff in front of an old-timey monitor, and you see a notebook and a pen and some hands. And on the cover of that notebook is a little logo of a sword. Did you know what sword was before you saw that?
I absolutely knew what sword was before I saw it.
Okay, I did not.
Okay, so in the Marvel Universe, there are 3 ultra-secret organizations. They're playing with it a little bit for the MCU, but it was S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. was focused on defending the homeland. Very domestic kind of stuff. SWORD was focused on extraterrestrial threats.
Right. It's an acronym that stands for Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division.
So yeah, in the comics at least, SWORD is focused on the threats from space and all the cosmic crap coming to Earth. Like, that's their job.
I assume it's meant to just be a mnemonic that SWORD is for offense and S.H.I.E.L.D. is for defense.
Yeah, look at it. You can look at it that way. The third ultra secret one that nobody knows about is I might be spoiling future MCU movies. Who knows? It's called Hammer, and they're the ones that defend against alternate dimensional threats.
And the bad guys have their own secret organizations. There's Hydra, which plays a role in this one.
Of course. I mean, Hydra's never going away.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to posit that this was the Scarlet Witch origin story movie.
Yes. No, I 100% agree. And they could not have told this story in a 2-hour film. Like, I told my wife walking up from the finale, I was like, they could not tell this story and do it justice the way they did on these 9 episodes in a movie. It wouldn't have felt right.
Yeah, it took them 4.5 hours to do it. Now, this is the Bad at Magic podcast, and what we do on here when we talk about films and cool intellectual properties is we evaluate the magic system. And this 4.5 hours of television shown over Disney Plus streaming on the internet was all about the magic system. And they did it right. I loved it.
Yes. Yeah. It was all about the magic system, specifically magic. They are introducing the fact that magic is a thing that exists in the universe, in the MCU.
Yeah, which we've known, but we haven't ever taken the time to really plumb the depths of what that means. A little bit in Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
So I assume that's the same kind of magic because they reference it in this.
They did. They referenced the Sorcerer Supreme, which that I got to give them like 1 point off. Like, you got a 99% for me because this feels like something Doctor Strange would have been all over.
Like he would have been involved.
Yeah, like Sword would have been set up their tents, and then like Doctor Strange showed up, was like, "Nah, it's fine, I got it."
That's how I always felt like in Winter Soldier when Steve Rogers was kind of taking on the entirety of Hydra all by himself, where they were launching these ships that were going to destroy like half the world population.
Well, yeah. Well, who is he? Like, who is he going to tell?
Shouldn't Tony come get involved or something? I mean,
that's how it should have ended. Like, it's Nick Fury just sitting there screaming, "This is not an Avengers movie. We're going to handle it just the 3 of us."
Yeah. All right, so I kind of want to take this episode by episode because the way I did it was I deconstructed each one into parts. There was kind of the trappings of the genre of the episode. There was the foreshadowing about the greater story that was happening, and there was a few meta things going on. So, as you mentioned, of the 9 episodes, I think like 6 of them were almost exclusively centered around just being a loving send-up of a decade's worth of TV shows.
Yes, and they picked the good ones.
Yes, and we didn't know why. Like, why are they doing this? I mean, you might have been able to surmise from hints at like Age of Ultron or something like that why we were doing this. We knew it was about Wanda and Vision, but why are we watching this TV show?
I feel like I was a little more informed about what's going on because this plot line was informed directly from a couple of different or Marvel comic plot lines that I was aware of beforehand. So I kind of knew that this was, spoilers everybody, Wanda's mental break. So I knew that she was responsible for it, that she was doing it, and so then the TV shows had to do something with her coping mechanism.
But even that, the fact that you made that assumption that she did it also helped conceal the surprise that was the twist in episode 8.
This is true. That she did it, but then there's also an external player that recognized and is trying to leverage that.
Right. Okay. So this episode, it had the subtitle of "Filmed Before a Live Studio Audience." It's kind of like I Love Lucy, Leave It to Beaver. It's in a 4:3 ratio, black and white, laugh track, multi-camera. Pristine hair and clothing on everyone. You referred to this before as mise-en-scène. One of our listeners to the podcast who teaches French has corrected us and said that the pronunciation of that is actually mise-en-scène. Mise-en-scène.
Mise-en-scène.
So,
okay.
Mise-en-scène. So the mise-en-scène of this was 1950s I Love Lucy. Decor, plot devices. And I became so conscious of stuff I used to take for granted, like the conflict of contrivance, where you're sitting around and we don't know why there's a heart on the calendar, and I don't want to tell you I don't know, and you don't want to tell me you don't know, so we both make up lies, and it just makes for a zany, kooky plot.
Right. Wanda thinks it's because they're having an anniversary, and Vision realizes it's because they're having company over.
Yeah, so she comes out dressed in her sexy night robe. When the boss comes over for dinner, hilarity ensues. Which all seems kind of throwaway until, like you said, it kind of takes that turn, and we rip out of the mise-en-scène of the 1950s TV show and realize there's something bigger going on here. Now, every one of these episodes had an advertisement in it. And I made the false assumption that those were just throwaways, but really what they were was filled with clues as to what was going on. So my second watch through WandaVision, I was really paying close attention to these, and I realized a few things about them. You mind if I...
Please, by all means, go ahead.
Okay, so in the first one, in Film Before Live Studio Audience, the commercial was for the Toastmate 2000, and it was made by Stark Industries. And it was one of the few things that had color when everything else was black and white, and it had a little blinking light that sounded very uncharacteristic of a toaster. And it made a charging sound. And eventually we find out that this is representative of the bomb that hit Wanda's house in Sokovia and killed her parents.
Yeah, so like you said, all of these the commercials are full of not only Easter eggs, but hints as to these commercials are Wanda's subconscious screaming in pain.
Yes, and I would go farther and say that the commercials, one of in each of these episodes, are the main points of Wanda's suffering.
Oh, so each one of them is a highlight in her worst moments.
Yes.
Excellent.
So the first one's the bomb that killed her parents.
Okay,
so, and it has other things like the song. They eventually have this very 50s sitcom-y thing where like, well, we don't have an anniversary. Okay, it's today. We don't have a song. It's yakety yak because that's what you sang. It was funny. Let's put on rings. Here we go. And they have this happy ending. And you could tell there's this hint that that's what Wanda's going for here. Her life has not had a lot of happy endings, and she's created this world around her to isolate herself from all of the chaos and just have more happy endings.
Yes. I can't help but skip around because they do the thing where they both sit on the couch at the end of the episode and they look right into the camera, and then like the frames come in on the outside and the credits start to roll. And and it just wraps up like that. And like we presume that they go to bed or whatever. It doesn't matter. The show is over, so you don't need to know anything else. But then there's a later episode where Vision is starting to wake up. Like, we will talk about it, I'm sure. But he's starting to wake up to what's going on, and this is not normal. And like at one point, Wanda's like, no, this is over. And the credits start rolling on the screen. And he goes, no, this isn't over. And he keeps the argument going until the credits stop.
Yeah, but they keep rolling over the top of him. It was great. So in this one, Vision, like, oh, I remember everything, but he's not talking about the past and what happened to him in the Infinity War. He's just talking about their fake life here in this television studio. Their first neighbor is Agnes, which is a bit foreboding, and I didn't pick up on that at all the first time, but the second watch through, I was like, oh, that's interesting. She's the first one that interjects into their life.
Shows up out of nowhere, unbeknownst to Wanda, and like, why are you here?
But at this point, they both know that they have their powers and they can use them, but they just kind of have they don't know why, but they know that no one around them knows about their powers and they have to make an effort to conceal them.
Yeah.
And they don't...
It's a secret identity thing. Come on.
Yeah. And they can't really remember the past. So that's pretty much all of it. But I love that we're just dropped in the middle of this mystery. There's so many questions and we're just being fed little bits to try to figure it out.
This is the show respecting us as viewers. It's like, we're not going to spoon feed you. We're not going to tell you everything that you need to know. You don't need flashbacks to the Age of Ultron to know this crap. You're just going to pick it up like the intelligent adults that you are.
And they released 2 episodes. So, when it first came out, it was only 2 episodes, and then you had to wait a week before you got the next one. Now, in the age of Netflix, usually they just dump a whole series out and you can binge watch the whole thing. But here I felt it was important to have that waiting period.
Same thing that they did with... This is going to be the model, like the big budget ones, The Mandalorian, Game of Thrones. We're going to wait a week between episodes because they want this thing to be all anybody talks about for not a week,
on social
but
media
for months.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so episode 2, Don't Touch That Dial. Now you can see it. Like a new episode, it opens up and you can see the decor has changed. It's still black and white, still 4:3 ratio. There's still a laugh track. We go to the bedroom and they have separate twin beds on opposite side of the room.
Hang on a second. That by itself was super important. If you recall, the first episode had like 2 total sets. Or I'm sorry, 3. It had the living room, the kitchen, and the workplace. That was it.
Yep.
That's the only sets they had. In the second episode, we actually go to the bedroom. We go outside. There's stuff that happens in the wider world. Like we see more.
Yeah, and you could feel it growing as the television decades march onward. We had the animated opening credits that looked like the beginning of Bewitched, and a kitschy little theme song. Illusion. This is the one where they did like the community magic show, and I really enjoyed the plot of this one, where you had like the queen bee socialite that Wanda had to try to get in good with, and Vision accidentally swallowed the gum, and he was trying to get in the neighborhood watch, and you're starting to meet some of the other characters in this neighborhood, some of the other people that they're surrounded by, and just feel like, who are these people? Why are they here? What do they want? What's their interaction? Where did they come from?
And then you get this jarring moment again. Everything's going great. The was it mise-en-scène? Mise-en-scène? Mise-en-scène.
Mise-en-scène.
Mise-en-scène. The mise-en-scène is very Bewitched. It's still laugh tracky. There's still the jump cuts. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the radio starts talking to Wanda directly. Wanda, are you there? Wanda, who is doing this to you? And like one of the characters freaks out, cuts their hand, everything's in black and white, except for this blood pouring off of her wrist, and all of that's just scarlet red. And then we just move on and forget about it. Oh, it's just a weird thing that happened.
Yep. Again, there's just kind of the slow trickle of details where you're like, all right, something's not right. There's something else going on, but we don't know what it is yet. Okay, so then at the end, they do the thing where they sit down on the couch and restate the lesson that we've learned. All we had to do was be ourselves. She says, like, this is our home now. I want us to fit in. And there's this foreshadowing of what's causing this, what's happening, but they're not beating us over the head with it. There's a few times happen, like you said, where there's like a long pause where something's happened that's disrupted the normal rhythm of the genre. And you're like, okay, this isn't right. I think she found the helicopter in the bushes in episode 2.
Yes, it was color, and it was just
it was
toy.
But it was period correct, but it was in color and it had a sword logo on it.
Yes, and we find out later, spoilers again, that was an automated drone, like a modern drone that they flew into this town that was absorbed into the illusion and was transformed into the era appropriate thing that it was.
Yes. And this is also the first time we get a hint that Wanda is manipulating the world to keep it the way that she wants.
Oh, is this where the closing credits were starting?
Yes. Yeah, they go outside and the beekeeper comes up out of the sewer.
Yes. It was very ominous. Yep. Like, it was dark, the music was foreboding, and they were looking at this guy in a beekeeper costume of all things, climbing out of the sewer, and he does the slow turn, the blacked out face, and looks at him. And she just says, no. And it jump cuts back to the scene previous to that. And then instead of going outside again, they sat down on the couch and did the rolling credits.
Yep. Well, and right at the credits, Wanda and Vision kiss, and it kind of transitions to the 1969, 1970 era. Like, everything starts to turn into color, and the decor changes, and you can feel it moving ahead again. All right, I got to... Sometimes in the show, they'll just throw in a clever thing that I enjoy. At one point when Vision goes to the neighborhood watch meeting and the men are doing men version of gossip, which was way better than the women version of gossip, if you ask me. Someone offers him a stick of big red gum and starts the debate, is gum food? So I want Josh, I want you to weigh in on the debate. Is gum food?
No, gum has no nutritional value. You don't eat gum. If you were starving and you found a bunch of gum, like, you're still screwed. Gum is not food. That's my stance. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think this one's pretty open and shut. It's not like is a hot dog a sandwich.
A hot dog is a sandwich.
I'm going to keep rattling these off, and you're going to act like there's only one answer. This feels like that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa's trying to get Bart to engage on philosophy. She's like, "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" And he goes,
"Yeah, he goes this." Yeah, and he does the one hand thing.
And she goes, "Well, what if there's a tree in the forest and there's no one around to hear it? Does it still make a sound?" He's like, "Yeah." It goes, yeah, you're no fun.
Well, hang on. Do you really think a hot dog is not a sandwich?
I think it's an interesting debate to have if you don't just pretend like there's only one possible answer.
So if you had
is gum food?
Hang on a second.
There's a lot of attributes that gum have that make it similar to food. It's something that has flavor. You put it in your mouth. It gives your brain the sensation of being fed.
No, you said this. Gum was open and shut. If you have a turkey sandwich and you turn it sideways, is it now a hot dog? Is that what you think?
I think in order for something to count as a sandwich, doesn't the bread have to be sliced all the way across? No, Subway doesn't slice. I don't know, man.
Hot dogs are sandwiches, people. Like if you think gum is food, or if you think a hot dog is not a sandwich, then please, by all means, text Ben. Like I don't want to hear it.
No.
We'll listen to it.
I'll go to the open thread for episode 41 on our subreddit, and you can engage in the debates. It'll be great. All right, the commercial in this episode is for a Swiss watch, but if you remember, the name brand of the watch is Strucker.
Yes, which is the colonel that was the guy that did the experimentation on Wanda to give her the powers.
In Hydra in Age of Ultron.
Yes.
Okay, so again, the first one was the bomb that killed her parents. This one is the Hydra agent that was experimenting on her and risking her life and keeping her confined in a cage.
Yes.
Now, if you also didn't notice, the same man and woman from the first commercial were in the second commercial. It was like completely different decade, different genre of commercials, but same actors.
Okay.
And it has a play. I'll wait to resolve that one. Yeah, that's about all I had for episode 2. Now, we had a 2-week break. During that 2-week break, I was kind of getting the tweets and Facebook posts and seeing things on Reddit and stuff like that. And there was this weird thing happening among the fans where there was a big contingent of people that were unwilling to give Marvel the benefit of the doubt with what they were doing creatively.
Okay. Like people that were unwilling to? Like, so they just,
yes.
they didn't like it, is what you're saying.
Yes. I don't like this. This sucks. I don't see where this is going.
So that's interesting because that is the response that my wife had. Nicole, we were watching this and I'm like, this is great. Like they're doing such unique, clever things with the format and going back and hearkening to all of these old shows. And she's like, it's super boring. There's a reason shows don't look like this anymore.
Yeah, and I could see if you went to the next episode and there was no progress or no change, why you would be impatient with it. But there was a huge change between the first and second episode. So I was like, where's this going? I love this mystery. I have so many questions and they're giving me little details and I can feel it's going somewhere, but I don't know yet.
That's how I felt. But my wife was just impatient for them to get to like she just didn't want to revel in the feeling of not knowing. She just wanted to know.
So there's a thing in television shows. I think usually the example they give is like Moonlighting with Bruce Willis and I forget what her name was, the woman from the 1980s, where there was this ongoing tension of the fact that they kind of had this playful pseudo-sexual relationship where they were attracted to each other, but they never actually did it. And it propels the series, this tension of them being attracted to each other, but never actually the relationship forming into something meaningful propels the series. And then once it happens, then you lose all that tension and the show loses its interest. And this happened for me in this. Like when they actually spilled the beans and we knew everything and it just turned into like a boring modern sci-fi FBI thriller, I was like, oh, this is boring.
Aww.
So I had the opposite reaction.
Oh, you see, I had the opposite reaction from you. Like the more I found out, the more I was engaged by it. Like, oh, now we have multiple subplots that we get to track, and this one's always going to change decades and do weird stuff in the illusion fantasy town. But this one is going to be the march of progress of, this is serious. This is MCU level stuff going on, and we need to solve it.
That's where I found it to just have the most wooden, tinny, boilerplate, predictable, plot devices and characters. It was just annoying.
Oh.
But we'll get to that. So we finally had to wait a week. And we have episode 3 now in color. Reminded me of the Brady Bunch, which I used to watch a ton as a kid. So I just felt like going home. I wanted Alice to come out of the kitchen and make a joke.
I always confuse. I remember watching this as a younger child on Nick at Night and all of that, but I always confuse Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family. I can't keep them straight in my head.
I never watched Partridge Family, so I don't have that problem.
Oh, lucky you.
Okay, so there's some common themes. She's reading Glamorous magazine, but it's kind of changed over the time. See, there's lots of the production designers must have had a field day with this, just all the things that they got to change in their sets and stuff like that. So now she's pregnant, and they're using the opening montage, even though it's sunny and reminds us of the past, and it has all this nostalgia associated with it. They're also using it to advance the plot. So in the opening credits, they're painting the baby's room and building a swing set in the backyard, and you're seeing them interacting with their neighbors and coworkers and developing their relationships and all that kind of stuff. Shot to tinny intro music and then cut to a multi-camera set.
Which was, I mean, glorious. And again, we go into the classic Brady Bunch, like, normal plot line of feelings and
emotions. Still got a laugh track.
There's some weird things going on, and, like, Vision goes to work and has these issues going on, and Wanda's dealing with her powers going on the fritz at home because she's pregnant, probably. And then, this is the one where, like, Vision gets the email? Or is this the one where Vision, like, talked to his coworker for the first time?
Talks to his coworker for the first time.
So,
and... Go ahead.
This is the one where it starts to break down for Vision, right?
Yes, this is where he finally, since he doesn't remember the past, but he still knows enough to figure out something's not right.
Yes, and so he does his little, like, his coworker is spouting off these things that don't quite fit the scenario or what's going on, and Vision just gets the look in his face like, something's not quite right here. And he does the thing where he puts his hand to the guy's head and does the Mind Stone trick and breaks him out of Wanda's illusion for 10 seconds.
Yeah, and it's like he's living in horror world.
Yeah, and it's like terrifying. This guy is desperately like, you have to save us. I'm in such screaming agony all the time. Please get her out of my head. You have to make her stop. And then he just puts him back to sleep. And it's like, oh gosh, what was that about?
Yeah, and I probably should talk to her about this.
This might need to be addressed.
Okay, so there was a joke in this episode that was so good. I just loved it. There was a scene where you cut to the house of the guy with the handlebar mustache and the woman who's the queen bee socialite. And she comes out of the kitchen and she goes, Phil, do these earrings make me look fat? And he gets this look of terror on his face. And then the power goes out. And he goes, oh, thank God.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's a classic married person joke.
Yeah, but we're still stuck in like the Brady Bunch, mise en scène, where we have the tinny music, the laugh track, they're making pregnancy jokes the whole time. Like he's carrying around a book about pregnancy and he's asking her stupid man questions. He's reading the book. He's like, darling, you should probably sit down. And then they go into the argument over the kids. He flies and he gets the slide whistle sound effect, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was good. The accelerated pregnancy cycle, like this whole episode, we go from conception to having 2 infant children. I love the math that Vision couldn't do. It's like, oh, well, based on the progress you've made so far, the kids should be due on Friday.
Yeah, but then he realizes that there's no pattern to what's happening, and he doesn't know who's controlling it. So that's a question in his mind. Is like, what's controlling this? So the commercial during this one was for it was just like a typical 1970s like bubble bath commercial. Like, buy this bubble bath. Do you remember what the bubble bath was called? I
don't remember. No.
Hydra.
Oh, of course it was.
And again, the woman in the tub was the same from the previous 2 commercials.
Mm-hmm. Sinister.
Want to get away? Okay. So
yes, she does.
Yeah. Time's leaping ahead. Vision's starting to get suspicious, and weird things are starting to happen. Like their neighbor Herb cuts through the stone wall with his hedge trimmer.
With what is clearly a drop background behind him, like a painted like skyline 10 feet like from the guy's head. And he's like, yeah, Herb, what are you doing? Oh, just trying to do my thing.
Yeah, he doesn't know what's going on. Then at the very end, after the twins have been born and they resolve the conflict they've set up in the 70s TV world about what are we going to call the babies, since they got 2, they both got to use their names. Haha, everything's fine. Yay. And then Geraldine says the word Ultron.
Yes, out of almost nowhere.
Yeah, and then Wanda's like, you got to go.
What did you say? And then she noticed the pendant, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, she has a sword pendant.
Like, where did you get that?
And then she ejects her out.
Well, we don't know that, though. All we see is, like, they do a jump cut to Vision for a second. He comes back in the other room. He's like, oh, where did she go? Oh, she had to leave.
Yeah, and then Mega Fourth Wall Break, Daydream Believer by the Beatles, and we see the military camp outside, and that's the end of that episode.
Yeah, she is... Our character that was ejected from the hexagon was We see her lying on the ground, dazed, and being picked up by the military.
And just from a meta point of view, I can totally relate to when Vision came back with the doctor, and he comes in and his wife's sitting there on the floor in their house holding a baby. Like I really had a moment there. I was like, yeah, I can relate, Vision. I understand how that
feels. For the other 99% of the world out there, that's not a normal thing.
All right, so in episode 4, we interrupt this program. This is the first time where we stop going ahead in our decades in the television world and we go to the modern sci-fi procedural on the outside world.
And it starts, if I'm correct, it starts with Rambo blinking back into existence in the hospital room where her mother died.
Yes, I loved this. This is the beauty of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in all its power, just like they did in the Spider-Man movies. Where let's look at this again. This was a huge thing that happened. We don't just have to refer to it as something that happens in the past. Let's go back and look at it from another angle. What would it be like if you were in a hospital at the moment Hulk snapped his fingers and half of the people that weren't in the hospital before are now here? What's happening?
Oh, and they did that scene great because it was utter chaos.
Yeah, like there's too many people here, and oh my gosh, what's going on? And all the ones that just reappeared that had been gone for 5 years are like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, all the ones that reappeared thought they had fallen asleep for 5 minutes, and now, but their loved ones are gone. There are new people in the room. I was in a hospital for a reason. What happens to the people that woke up that were sick, that got blinked away, Ben, that woke up in a hospital bed next to somebody else that's already in that hospital bed? This is terrible. I think about the ramifications of the snap or the blip that they called it in the Spider-Man movies so much because half of the population of the universe disappeared instantly. But the fallout from that would have killed another third of the population easily.
Yeah. I don't think they'll ever deal with it. Like, what if the pilot of a plane was the one that went out in the plane crash?
What about all the people that got blipped off of the plane that reappeared, in midair someplace?
I don't see any profit to going down this road. It's just it's a fruitless thought exercise.
Let's presume that when Hulk snapped his fingers, the Mind Stone gave him the capacity to put everybody back into a safe place, so nobody was overlapping, nobody was in standing in midair or over the ocean or something like that. Just having all of these people reappear in the universe would strain every logistical supply chain to its breaking point.
Yes, I like that. My solution was just not to think about it. Yours was to find a way to resolve it. We'll go with that.
Right, well, this is a comic book thing. This is why you had to have all of the stones. You can't just have the Power Stone and snap everybody away. All of the stones feed off of each other. You have the Mind Stone, which expands your capacity to understand the things that you want to do. The Power Stone amplifies the ability to do such. The Soul Stone gives you the ability to manipulate the souls in order to make it happen. All of the stones feed into the thing that happened.
That was awesome.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was the highlight of this episode for me. Okay, so let me do one of mine. So in this episode 4, we interrupt this program. It's like fourth wall break. We're outside of the television show that you've been watching for the last 3 episodes. And maybe now all the fanboys are like, the sky is falling. Are like, oh, okay, I guess this is all right now. I don't know if your wife was like, oh, okay. But for me, I was like, okay, I guess it had to end eventually.
Oh, can we watch Bewitched again?
Yeah. So we're on the outside world, and they introduce a whole bunch of new characters, one of which is acting deputy director Tyler Hayward and Monica Rambeau. I think I had to watch 2 of these episodes before I realized I was supposed to know who Monica Rambeau was. And when I realized it and told Alicia, she's like, nuh-uh. It was the little girl from Captain Marvel.
Yeah, of course it was the little girl from Captain Marvel. Her name was Rambeau.
Okay, but I just didn't get it.
Captain Marvel's it was just other pilot friend. Her name was Rambeau.
Josh, what happened to me is I was watching Captain Marvel, and they're like, "Hi, this is my best friend, proper noun, and she has a daughter, proper noun."
Ben, this is the MCU. You have to know every one of these characters is going to be important for the rest of the time. Tony Stark's funeral had the kid from Iron Man 3. Nobody knows his name to this day, but he was there.
I know. I had to look it up, but I was glad I did. I can only remember Monica Rambeau because it's in my notes in front of me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to.
Nice. All right, I'll give you a pass. Go ahead.
Okay, so Monica wakes up in the hospital. She's last thing she remembers, she was there visiting her mother who was getting chemotherapy. Luckily, she bumps into a nurse who remembers her and her mother, and she's like, "Oh, dude, you blipped. Your mom died Okay, it was 3 and 2. I can't remember which way it was. Anyway, you've been gone for 5 years. Your mom's been dead for 2, or you've been gone for 5 years. Your mom's been dead for 3. One way or the other, her mom's dead. The Captain Marvel's best friend.
Let's take a second to appreciate nurses that can remember a random person's face from 5 years ago and the patient that they were there to see.
Yeah. All right. So then fast forward 3 weeks from her coming back, and she goes back to work, and she's a hotshot agent at SWORD headquarters. And we get introduced to SWORD headquarters, kind of like going to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters for the first time.
Which was also awesome.
And acting director Tyler Hayward does this thing, and I want to introduce this. I want to propose this as a movie rule. That is, whenever you call someone the head guy in charge and they correct you that they're not the head guy in charge, they want to be the head guy in charge. She's like, oh, hey, Director Hayward. He's like, no, acting deputy director Tyler Hayward. Yeah, he wants to be the head. He wants to be the guy. It's false humility. He's a tyrant seeking the glory.
Got it. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. That feels like something people do.
So he establishes the world. Lost half of my personnel in the blip, and half lost their nerve. Glad to have you back, Rambo. I need you, but a rule your mother made means you're grounded. I'm going to send you off on this completely unimportant mission I don't care about at all. You're headed to New Jersey.
Wow. That's a great summation of exactly how that conversation went. That guy was, all right, so the more we see of him in his office job, there was a couple of flashbacks when Wanda was interacting with him. That guy is like has the worst bedside manner or the worst way of dealing with subordinates ever. It's like,
you're supposed to hate him, and he did a good job, I guess. I don't like that character.
Not at all. I don't really like the actor either, but he did a good job of being a guy that you just immediately want to punch in the face. Like, you look at him, it's like, you deserve to be punched. I don't know what for yet, but I'm sure you deserve it.
Well, just like you were talking about how with these TV shows, they establish the mise en scène that you expect and then deviate a little bit from it, and you pick up on that clue even if you don't realize it. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
He's talking about what the purpose of SWORD is, and he's like, space is full of unexpected threats. You know, you go, oh, he's the paranoid guy that thinks that's racist against aliens or whatever. You know, just
like he said 3 sentences, and you're already thinking this guy's clearly the bad guy. He's going to use his weird position to justify all of his actions, and they're going to be terrible. But he thinks he's the good guy. He's not.
And by the same token, Monica immediately establishes herself as the grounded one that has a more complete picture of things when she corrects him by saying, and allies.
Right. Like, bigger picture, it's not all bad. Dial it down, Chief.
Now, enter another character, FBI agent...
John Woo.
John...
I don't think that's right.
Not John. Daniel, something. We'll just call him Woo.
I'm so happy.
Who was from the Ant-Man franchise. And I was happy,
yes, too. He did such a great job in Ant-Man. I'm like, oh, this guy deserves to be in the MCU. He was hilarious. I am glad he's here.
Just like Phil Coulson. You know, just whenever he comes around, he lights up the scene, brings this air of like good humor and calmness, but also competence and projects that onto what he's doing.
He's an interesting character that I really appreciate because it's a nuanced thing with him. Everybody immediately dismisses him because he's such a likable personality and he seems kind of bumbling when he like just looking at him. But like you said, underneath that, he is very competent. So he is immediately dismissed by everybody around him as a non-player, but he can get the job done.
So now they start to stagger the timeline a bit. And we go back in time 24 hours, and we're back. Kat Dennings' character from the Thor franchise. I just realized we brought in somebody from Ant-Man. We brought in somebody from Thor. We brought in people from Avengers. They're all together on this team of people, SWORD, investigating what's going on with Wanda over here.
Not only that, but they progressed the plot because the lady from Thor, she got her degree. She's no longer an intern or a grad student. She's an actual professor.
She's Dr. Darcy Lewis. This is as dubious as Denise Richards as nuclear physicist Christmas Jones in Bond universe, but whatever.
What, you don't like Darcy's?
No.
Oh, I like Darcy.
I like the character, but honestly,
what's wrong with it? She's a lovable goof. I can
hear the ice cracking underneath my feet. I just didn't like it. So the Hayward has been second fiddle long enough. You can see him not taking reasonable advice from his subordinates. And now we're starting to overlap the things we've gotten from the TV episodes, and we can see Dr. Darcy's Lewis's hands holding the notebook, and we realize she was the one that was watching the television show, and the timelines are starting to match up, and we've oriented ourselves what's going on in the real world versus what's going on in the TV world.
Right. We get that background of the fill-in of this is what's happening from all perspectives. And then when we launch into the further plot lines, now we have both sides of the story. So we can appreciate everything that's going on.
So Dr. Lewis sets up the thing where she puts Wu on the radio and he's calling to Wanda, and that matches up with what was happening in the second episode where he was calling her on the radio. And they're starting to unravel the mystery from their side, and we're starting to unravel it from the other side. They do one of my movie pet peeves here, which is the reason I don't like modern procedurals, which is where they send him out to a truck bed that's filled with racks and racks of equipment with flashy lights on it, when really all he was doing just needed like a handheld radio.
Well, that's a thing. That's a thing that happens. Like, they're super over-prepared for every contingency, and they're not thinking about the simple solution.
It feels like NCIS, where they're just hand-wavy on tech and think that the audience is stupid, and I just find it pandering and annoying.
Well, again, Ben, we're not the best audience for that, because you and I both know how bumbling and stupid the military actually is, and they wouldn't have any of that equipment.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Wanda, who is an all-powerful witch, but just wants a normal life and to be left alone. And I thought, I can relate to that. Just wanting to have a normal life and be left alone. Like, that's relatable. So that's one thing I think that's important in this series. While we're looking at these characters that have otherworldly superpowers, they also are just experiencing emotions and situations that we can relate to.
When do I get to go full comic book nerd on you again?
Almost. So episode 5, we go back to the television series. Now it's like Who's the Boss, Family Ties, Growing Pains, the kind of stuff I just watched all growing up. I like the contrast that happens in watching these 4 decades of television shows in rapid succession. You can kind of see the innovations that were happening in television. Everything's a little less perfect. Like, she comes downstairs and her hair is frazzled and she's trying to get the baby to stop crying. That never would have happened in the previous 3 decades. There's still a laugh track, but their clothes look like the 80s. Man, I was really impressed by the acting that Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen were doing here. That was another thing that just really made this work.
Yes, because there was Vision played his part perfectly, where he's kind of this cold, unfeeling robot thing on the inside, but he's adapting and he's just totally dedicated to this relationship, but he's still questioning things. He showed and portrayed a ton of emotional diversity in all of these episodes. And it feels very genuine. It feels that he's fully committed to this relationship, but there's questions that are going unanswered, and he's uneasy with it. But the family is first.
But he's also playing his role of TV dad.
Yes, on top of all of this.
And Wanda is very gleefully and happily playing her role as TV mom, and you can start to tell in this episode that she's enforcing it. That she starts to hit the reset button and adjust the details, and Vision notices it and starts to get upset.
Yes. Not only that, but one of my favorite little details that they call out later is her accent will drift in and out depending on how emotionally vulnerable she's feeling at the moment. She is fully vested in just trying to play this pretend life. And when it starts to fall apart or the curtain gets pulled back a little bit, she starts slipping back into her actual life, and she doesn't like it.
There's another thing that's happening here where gender roles are reversed, where Vision is the character that's kind of being protected, I guess, for lack of a better word, even though he's very powerful. Wanda is protecting him from knowing that he died. Yeah,
that you're actually dead and all of this is fake.
Yeah, and so she's gaslighting him in every sense of the word. If you don't know what gaslighting is, it refers to a movie that came out a long time ago where there was a guy that was trying to trick his wife into thinking she was going crazy by turning the lights down and pretending that nothing was happening. And Wanda's doing exactly that. She's turning the lights down and Vision's like, what's going on? She's like, what are you talking about? I don't see anything. And she's doing it over and over. And he finally gets so mad that at the end of this, he yells at her hardcore. He flies up in the air. His costume goes away. And he's like, I am not putting up with this anymore. You have to tell me what's going on.
And she flies up on the other side of him. And I don't remember how that got resolved. She didn't reset that one. I think she just said something that re-established Vision's commitment to her and the relationship before his own personal confusion.
The way it was resolved is that she's forthcoming with him with her knowledge, but she admits the fact that she doesn't fully understand what's going on either.
Oh, okay. Which is a cop-out. I feel like that's a huge cop-out.
So he says, you can't control me the way you do them. And she's like, I don't know how any of this started in the first place. And he's like, well, I don't either, but what you're doing is wrong. This is wrong. Meanwhile, the kids are growing up. It's turning into like the family drama. They get a dog. The dog dies, and the life lesson is about learning that some things are forever, like families and love, but some things don't last forever, like the dog. And it seems like just a random off-the-shelf plot, but it's starting to hint at that is therapeutic for Wanda learning to deal with her grief.
Oh, yeah. This was, like you said, because it's wrapped up in the fake TV show, it's easy for us, the viewers, to dismiss that as, oh, that was just the kitschy subplot they're doing for that internal TV episode. But no, this is like the lesson that Wanda needs to learn herself.
And she does that thing I often find myself doing as a parent, where I'm giving my children this trite, rehearsed lecture that's to them, not realizing that it's really to me, and not taking the lesson myself.
Do as I say, not as I do, children.
Right. Yeah. All right.
Maybe this was the one that broke my brain. At the end of either this episode or the next one, I think it was this one, we get a knock on the door.
Yes, this is where they introduce Pietro.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
geek out in the comic book way.
I flipped when this happened because the door.
Oh, me too.
Knock on the door and they open the door, and it's Pietro, clearly Quicksilver, but it's the Quicksilver from the latest X-Men Days of Future Past franchises, not the Quicksilver that we had in Age of Ultron.
Right. Who looked like Eastern European instead of American.
Yes, and this blew my mind for so many reasons. One, and he even says, I'm
head exploding emoji.
What you got?
I think you even sent me a head exploding emoji.
Like, oh, what? You got no love for your long lost brother? It's like, holy crap. So, one, they're admitting that Pietro is back, but he died. We know he died. They mentioned multiple times that he died. Second, this is the wrong Pietro. This is the Pietro from IP that they previously did not own. Like, is this for reals? Are they bringing him in? Is it from an alternate reality? Are they folding in all of the X-Men movies? Are those all canon now? Like, I had so many questions and my head was spinning.
Oh, yeah.
All of these meta questions.
That had to have been on purpose.
Of course. It had to have been on purpose. And I'll tell you what, even if it was just a bait and switch to screw with us, it was so worth it.
Oh, yeah. And ultimately, that's all it was. Unfortunately,
maybe we'll see how it goes.
But it was like 3 weeks before they resolved it, and this was all happening in fandom. Like everyone was like, "What does this mean?" Because now this is another fifth wall break.
Yeah,
We're like, okay, well maybe Wanda and Vision, and this is their origin story, and this thing's happening with their powers. But now it's like, holy crap, are we now breaking the laws of business and bringing in this character from another property and tying these two universes together that previously never the two shall meet?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's no way to say it. That was a fifth wall break because they were deliberately referencing not the movie, not us the viewers, but the business environment that exists in creating these things in the first place.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, hats off.
All right,
I loved it. Loved it.
So that was the end of episode 5. We're already past the 50% mark. I know this because they told us in advance how many episodes there are going to be. I heard an author very brilliantly say there's one thing you can never hide from your reader, and that's how many pages are left in the book.
You always know when the story's going to have to get wrapped up.
Right. So we're only halfway through, and I'm like, they're just piling on more questions. I still don't know anything. What's happening? Why is this going on? They're just introducing new characters and making huge twists, and it was really exciting at this point. So episode 6, now they go to the mise en scène of Malcolm in the Middle.
Huge fan. I love Malcolm in the Middle. This episode was one of my favorites, and they nailed it. It felt like I was watching Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, yeah. Now the 10-year-old kids become the narrators. The cameras zoom in on their face. We have these jump cuts, these kooky backstory 5-second fill-in scenes. It was great.
The parents are just normal people, just doing the best they can, and they're not doing a great job of it.
Yeah, it was great. They even had like a They Might Be Giants-esque theme song played over the beginning. Okay, I'm going to put a link in the show notes for this, but I learned something really interesting this week. Complete tangent. In the beginning of Malcolm in the Middle, their opening credits has like 30 grainy, look like it was taped on a VHS recorder video clips.
Okay.
And fans have since gone through, and of those 30, I think like half of them are clips from the first 3 or 4 episodes of the show, and then the other half are like random video clips you can just like look up on the internet, except one. There's one clip amongst all of those that no one could figure out where it came from. It was a picture of a skier who was on fire barreling down a cliff.
I know exactly what you're talking about. They can't find it?
No. So it's a mystery. And I stumbled across this video on YouTube talking about how the fact that if you Googled that video, the only thing you would find is other people trying to figure out what that video was, but no one knew where it came from or what it was. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that. Just a tangent.
Total tangent. Okay.
Another tangent, I forgot to mention the commercial from the previous episode. So in episode 5, the commercial showed a lady spilling on the counter, looked just like commercials from my youth in the 80s. And they're like, oh no, a mess. I need Lagos paper towels. It was the same lady again from all the other commercials. And they said, Lagos is for when you make a mess you didn't mean to. Now, you understand that reference,
Lagos,
right?
I believe, was the airport where Civil War happened?
No, is it the beginning of Age of Ultron where Wanda was helping out with the drug bust of the one character, proper noun, I can't remember, who was trying to steal the biological weapon? Right, and he threw the bomb at her, and she controlled it with her powers and flew it up in the air, but it didn't get high enough, and it blew up the building and killed some people.
Yes.
So Lagos paper towels for when you make a mess you didn't mean to. So again, another one of the traumatic experience in Wanda's life where she felt like she should have done something better but didn't.
Oof. Yeah, that kicked off the whole Sokovia Accords thing. Like, that's like really her fault.
Yeah. So in the episode 6, the Malcolm in the Middle episode, it's an all new Halloween spooktacular. So everyone's dressing up for Halloween, which is great because now Wanda and Vision get to come downstairs in like these kooky looking homemade Halloween costumes that look exactly like Scarlet Witch and Vision from the comic books in the 80s.
Yes, that is exactly what they look like, which is another thing that blew my mind because she was never allowed to wear that headpiece. Like, that was included in like the contractual obligations or whatever. She was never allowed to wear the little faceplate M-looking thing. Ever.
Huh. I did not know that. So in another fifth wall break, I guess we can just call this one a fourth wall break, she has alternate explanations for all of their costumes. She's a Sokovian fortune teller. He's a Mexican wrestler. I forget what Quicksilver's explanation for his costume was, but Billy and Tommy also had explanations. Now, I have a question for you, comic book nerd. Who is Tommy supposed to be? Does he grow up to be some character in the MCU that I don't know?
Okay, so Wanda's kids are super weird because in the comic books, in several of the storylines, she has a mental break when Vision died and kind of created an alternate universe where Vision didn't die and they had children and they were twins. So they were kind of illusions, and she would leave them at home with like nurses or governesses when she went off to do her Avengers stuff, but whenever she left, the kids would disappear and they would reappear when she came back. So they weren't sure if they were illusions or not. She kept firing people that told her they weren't real. And then later it turned out that they were absorbed by a demon lord because they were actually fractures of his essence. Look, comic books in the 1980s were really weird.
Well, I'm glad you hit the eject button there because my brain was already doing it.
Yeah, that's the point where like nobody cares anymore. Like the answer is it's super complicated, but no, those kids are not real. They are canon.
Okay.
She has not real twins with superpowers, but they're not real.
All right. So the commercial in this episode was a claymation kid on a desert island, and he got yogurt in a cup.
Yes.
And they called it Yo Magic, which is not really hiding the meaning of it. And the thing is, he's sitting there stranded on this desert island, he's starving to death, and he can't open Yo Magic.
And then he dies.
So,
and that was a really gruesome, like, claymated thing to see, is this kid emaciating into a skeleton until he's dead.
So I think, again, that's supposed to be Wanda feeling like a failure because she wasn't able to use her magic to save Vision.
Yeah. Or just the fact that she's struggling with the concept that she has trapped all these people here and she's coming to terms with she doesn't know how any of this crap works.
Yeah. Now, she's starting to struggle with the fact of the things that aren't going according to her fantasy, and you can start to see the world tattering a bit at the edges. Like Vision starts exploring, and he goes out in the neighborhood and sees the people that are like look like they're on repeat.
Well, and this, he says, like, he lies to her deliberately. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go. I've got a neighborhood watch thing to go do," and he deliberately tries to find the edge of this thing that they are living in. And the farther he gets from the center of town, the less fleshed out it is. Like, everybody's standing around not doing anything, but they're all still alive and aware of their not being able to do stuff. Like, it's really terrifying.
Yeah, and then one of them turns out to be Agnes. And again, they're throwing us off Agnes's trail because he does the thing where he wakes her up and she's like, "Oh my gosh, the horror. I'm lost in my own town. What do I do?" And then he puts her back into the spell and she turns around and goes back into town.
You're an Avenger. You're going to save us. And what's an Avenger? Like, clearly there's pieces of his background that he's missing.
Yeah. So we're already through episode 6 now, and the mystery is still persisting. Now, meanwhile, Monica Rambeau and Dr. Darcy Lewis and all those kind of people, like Monica has gone in and out of the hex, and they find out that like something might be going on with her related to going in and out of it. Darcy does the annoying NCIS thing where she's like, "Hang on, give me 2 seconds to hack into the secure network on the base. Tippity tap tap tap, and I'm in."
I will always and forever hate the term hacking in TV. It's like that's that's not how it works. But okay, it's fine. Moving on.
So it also starts to become apparent that Hayward is more apparent that Hayward is the bad guy because they start to realize that he doesn't care about Wanda at all. He's after Vision.
Yes, he is tracking Vision. Like, he wants Vision. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
$3 billion of vibranium.
Yeah. Now, I also, to tie into something we talk about a lot on this podcast, there were minions everywhere in this television series in the way that completely takes that genre of people for granted. There's just random generic FBI agents and sword agents everywhere, blindly following every order.
They were like underfoot, and it was driving me nuts because then our protagonist, at one point when Hayward turns on him, I don't even know the guy's name, when the bad guy turns on him and has him locked up or whatever, and then they break out because of course they do, and they put jackets with the hoods up, and they just go jump in a truck and drive off. It's like, there are guys everywhere. Is nobody checking on them? Is nobody checking to see, like, hey, did you sign out this truck? Where's your hand receipt? Like, there are protocols for this stuff.
Yeah, we've been minions. We know how this works.
Exactly. You can't just jump in a car and drive off. You can't do that.
At one point, I was looking at Paul Bettany in the spandex suit, and I realized how much the modern costumes hide the actor's physiques. But at 49, he's in pretty good shape.
You're assuming that he's not wearing like the padded muscle suit under the now crappy spandex.
You're right. I guess I am assuming that. All right. I had this one scene where he gets all the way to the very edge of town, and no one's even moving. There's an entire like cul-de-sac, and on the cul-de-sac, there's people trick-or-treating and crossing the street and stuff, and everyone's frozen in place. And he's kind of wandering through this, trying to get their attention, getting them to interact with him. And I had this funny thought. I'm like, okay, if you're the director of this episode and you've got this all framed and all the actors in place, what do you say to start the scene?
And nobody move.
And action? All right, so episode 7, we're almost to the end here. This one was called Breaking the Fourth Wall. It was set in the style of Modern Family. The Office.
It was Modern Family, yeah.
Yeah, Modern Family. But the opening credit had music that was very reminiscent of The Office and the opening credits of The Office.
That's true. Maybe it was The Office.
It was both.
It felt that way.
It was very much that mise en scène of the
like the documentary kind of style.
Yeah, where like you cut to the actors staring at a camera like they're being interviewed for a documentary, explaining what they were thinking at that moment.
It's fun. It's an interesting trope, but like people have adopted it, and it's a standard thing. And again, we know what that is supposed to be. And so at the one point in the episode where Vision is trying desperately to get back to the center of town, and random crap keeps happening to stop him, and then he's doing the interview thing with the guy, and he stops and he goes, "What am I doing? Why am I talking to you?
Why am I talking to you?"
And then he gets up and flies off.
Yeah, and Wanda's doing the same thing, and I love how it fit into the mise en scène of The Office and Modern Family, where she's starting to realize, I'm having a mental breakdown. Like, that's what's going on here. I'm having a mental breakdown. And she's, hiding in bed from the children and the laugh tracks. Oh, no, I can't remember if there was a laugh. I guess there's not a laugh track anymore.
There was no laugh track, so no.
Yeah, but they're looking directly into camera. You cut to the TV and you can see a perfect weather forecast. It's like 68 to 70 all week, partly cloudy. But you also you can see the development over the decades of the television shows where now the grown-ups do not have it all together. They're like saying stupid stuff in front of children. Then they cut to the camera and they're like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. But they can handle it, right?
Well, and it also frays at the edges because at one point Wanda's doing her interview, talking to the camera, and then it breaks and like the camera guy like asks her a question and you hear a voice ask her a question clearly and like she stops.
Yeah.
Like, you're not supposed to talk.
You're not supposed to ask me questions.
So
that, yeah.
Oh, just the whole thing. Like they did such a great job. Again, I'm going to harp on this the whole time. The format of this was perfect for the message that they were trying to drive, is that Wanda is desperately trying to cope with emotions and powers that neither one of which she understands or controls. She's trying to hide from both of them, and it's all fraying at the edges the whole time.
Yes. Now, the commercial in this one was for Nexus, and it said Nexus. And it was in the format of like an antidepressant drug.
All right, so as a comic book nerd, this was...
All right, tell me what the significance of Nexus is.
Does it have another significance that I'm not aware of?
Let me finish reading you the ad. Nexus will anchor you back to reality. Side effects include feeling your feelings, seizing your destiny, facing your truth, and possibly more depression.
Okay. In the Marvel comic universe, there is a physical location called the Nexus of All Realities.
Okay, I do not know about this.
It's a physical... It's kind of a physical and a metaphysical place that you can travel to. It's in like a swamp somewhere in Louisiana. And if you know how to access it, you can literally travel to any alternate version of reality that you want to. And this blew my mind because I know that they have a show in the works about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Like this is going to be like his whole thing is dealing with the Nexus of All Realities.
Okay, again, it's the same actress in the commercial that's taking the antidepressant drugs. So have you picked up on who it is yet?
No.
It was Wanda's mother.
I'm literally covering my mouth like jaw agape. Like that's crazy. That was the actress in all of the commercials.
It was the same in all of the commercials.
That's so sad.
And her father's in about half of them.
Oh.
Okay, so now they're starting to tip their hand with the real mystery here, and that is that Agnes is starting to get a little bit impatient. And you can also tell that something's up with Pietro because he's getting a little bit nosy too in a way that doesn't quite fit into the sitcom.
Yes, because he is the only other character we've seen at this point that's blatantly breaking the fourth wall. He talks about Ultron, talks about people dying. Like he is really trying to stir up this information out of Wanda.
Yeah. So you think maybe there's something more to the fact that he wasn't the Pietro we expected?
At first, I thought he was a construct of Wanda trying to deal and cope with these emotions and bring them forward. But then later, I guess we find out that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah. So now back to the story of Monica. She's on the outside trying to get back in. She's, convinced herself that she's going to be the one that's got to get back in. And the scientists are warning her if she goes in again, something will happen. Classic superhero origin story. She charges through the wall anyway. Something happens to her and she comes in and obviously has newfound magical powers.
And they did a good job of showing that she was being frayed and pulled apart in these alternate personas by the alternate or the reality warping power that was Wanda. And something about her force of will was able to pull herself back together and maintain her identity regardless of the circumstances. So there is something supernatural that happened there. I have theories as to who she is, but I have not looked up her in the Marvel encyclopedia or anything, so I'm not going to conjecture. But
I tried to look it up, and from what I can tell, they might be going in a new direction here. The MCU, Marvel Studios may be creating a new character.
I've not done the research, so I don't know. I have guesses, but nothing educated.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know if you think. But from my cursory 5 minutes of research, I don't think she maps perfectly onto an existing character in the comic books.
Well, and then we find out later that she gets sucked up into space with the Skrulls. Anyway, so she's going to be part of the cosmic thing with the Guardians of the Galaxy and all that. So we don't have to worry about her in like the real MCU.
but she plays an important part here. She recognizes that she's had a few unfortunate things where maybe Wanda thinks not to trust her, like because she shot a hellfire at her off a drone or whatever. You know, people hate when you do that. And she goes in and confronts Wanda directly. She's like, I think you're doing this because you're grieving for all of your losses. And Wanda's like, I don't want to hear about it, which is exactly what's going on here. She's coping with her grief, and she'd rather just not think about it, not talk about it. And, you know, Monica's like, listen, I lost somebody important to me, but I can't change it. I just have to accept things the way they are. I don't want to make painful things go away. This is my truth. And even though you don't show it registering with Wanda right away, you can tell that she's planted the seed and that she's having the impact she needs to.
Right. It's the line that she kind of needed to deal with the pain. The seed is an excellent metaphor, because Wanda needed something to catalyze around to kind of rebuild her self-confidence and her self-worth, and just something to deal with all the tragedy that's been happening. Because in the past, we saw through the flashbacks later that it was Vision that she really kind of rallied around after all the terrible things happened in Sokovia and all of that. Like, Vision was her rock, and losing that kind of left her emotionally adrift, and she needed something else to latch onto.
And now we have the best movie reveal moment since like The Sixth Sense and Bruce Willis back in 1990. Like, it was excellent.
Oh, you liked it that much, huh?
Oh man. So Agatha Harkness, whatever, she can't find the kids, and she goes down in the basement, and what's her name? I forget her character's name. Agnes is there and reveals that her name is Agatha Harkness, who I didn't know. I had to look up, but okay, this is an established character in the comic books. It's this witch. And she's like, I'm a witch. And then it does this Addams Family montage over the closing credits, which was excellent. She's like, I killed your dog too.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. This is, I will say, this is one of those things that, again, you're going to lose another point for me, MCU, for this one. You're down to 98%. This felt like the same cop-out that they did in Captain America 2, Winter Soldier. We had this excellent plot dealing with very heavy emotional ramifications of the actions of the characters and dealing with them. And like, oh, well, hang on, it's getting a little too heavy. Let's throw in a clear black and white bad guy so we can go, there's the antagonist. Now we can have our big fight scene at the end.
I'm going to disagree with you here. So if underlying all of this is Wanda's grief for the tragedy that has been her life, Agatha Harkness is here going, I came here because you are exhibiting the most powerful magic I've ever seen in my 400 years on Earth. And I want it, and I'm losing patience with you because you're sitting here busy processing your grief so that you can't tell me how you did this. When Agatha is completely missing the point that the grief is the source of the powerful magic.
Okay. Well, I can get behind that. And I can understand like the motivations of this character. I just don't like that we had to have this character. Like, because we did. Like, the tropes of the storytelling, and we had to have a clear antagonist and a bad guy, and the fight scene. Like, it helps us to, like, have the characters physically and visually battle and deal with their emotions than it is to
I get that, and it did kind of go down the easy path a few times, but I think they recognized and pulled back several times, and I'll point them out later. Now, this was the funniest episode as far as I'm concerned. I love the fact that she expanded the boundaries of the hex, and it encompassed the camp where all of the minions were, and they turned into a traveling circus.
Yeah, they're a bunch of clowns. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And watching all them walk around like a bunch of clowns, I'll never look at a group of military guys the same. I'd be like, there's the strong man, there's the dancing bear, there's the bearded lady.
That was pretty good. I love that their armored car that they stole was a churro truck.
Yeah. There's the carnival barker, and then they got in a traffic jam in like this 4-way stop in the middle of nowhere. That just cracked me up. I love that. Now, this reveal of Agatha Harkness as the bad guy occurred at 193 of 276 minutes, so 70% of the way through this story, which was excellent. And most of that remaining 30%, like you said, was just flying around and shooting bolts of energy at each other.
Which was cool and visually stunning, and we had to have it done. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like Wanda could have dealt with her.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't in it for that. Okay, so episode 8, was previously on, but we're kind of done with the episodes of TV.
Yeah.
All of the secret doors have been opened enough that we're not acting out a television show anymore, even though we are in a slightly idealized version of Westview, New Jersey.
Slightly? That place was a crap hole when you were driving through it at the beginning.
All right, very idealized version of it. But the people still aren't happy. So episode 8 really shifts gears and flashes back to 1693, Salem, Massachusetts.
Yep, and we get to meet the origin story of our antagonist, which is the super entitled witch, Agatha Harkness.
Now, anyone that went to high school English knows that in the 17th century in Massachusetts, there were these completely specious witch hunts and innocent women were dying right and left, and everyone knows there's no such thing as witchcraft. That's what they want you to start with.
Yeah, well, and that's been a trope forever. It's like, oh, the Salem witch trials. Yes, in reality, they were a huge hoax and a lot of innocent people died. But I mean, it's such fertile ground, though, Ben, for storytelling. It's like, what if they were all witches?
Yeah. Okay. So that's what it does, and we see Agatha Harkness has the ability to drain power from other witches, which is probably why she's so old and around so long. But obviously, she has become power hungry, and she's in search of the ultimate power, which Wanda seems to have, and she wants it.
Woohoo! Because she was granted that incredible power in another flashback that we see by the Mind Stone, which was in Loki's scepter. Like, there are so many, like, great... the MCU did a great job of weaving this very intricate tapestry. And instead of trying to distract us on how all of the pieces don't quite line up, they're the ones that like to pick one little string out of the very center of it and like, oh, let's explore this to its logical conclusion.
Yeah. So now Agatha has Wanda kind of hostage. She's holding her children hostage or whatever. And she's like, we're going to see this through because you're going to tell me how you're making this powerful magic. So whatever you got to do. So Wanda starts setting up, instead of this fanciful TV series, she starts reliving the painful moments that were hinted at in all the commercials up to this point. So now Wanda starts to tick off those commercials one by one and go back to those moments in her life where painful things happened. And the first one kind of establishes why this whole thing exists in the first place. We go back to when she's 10 years old, living in Sokovia. She has a wonderful, happy home. Her father and mother come in. You're like, oh my gosh, it's the people from the commercials. And he brings in a suitcase and opens it up. And it's like, who's the boss? Addams Family, I Love Lucy, Bewitched, Malcolm in the Middle, Dick Van Dyke. Okay, got it. They all sit down on the couch together. They're happy. Everything's fine. It could just be a happy ending. No. Stark Incorporated, through the roof, mom and dad are dead.
Well, and that's the story she told in Age of Ultron in like 10 seconds. Like, we were trapped under the bed for 2 days waiting for Tony Stark to kill us.
Wow, I forgot about that.
She told that story, yeah. Bomb came in, they were trapped in the rubble, they were afraid every time it shifted that it was going to go off and kill them both, but it didn't.
Okay, and every time Wanda kind of wants to stop, and Agatha keeps pushing her through it. Go to the next scene. So she cuts to the next scene, and then... and they start to hint at this prophecy of the Dark Witch. And I want to introduce another movie rule here. And that is, in movies, when you talk about a prophecy, it's even stronger than Chekhov's gun. Like, prophecies in movies always get fulfilled. There's no such thing as a prophecy you talk about in a movie that doesn't get fulfilled.
Well, because why would you bring it up? Yeah, that's the definition of Chekhov's gun. Why would this even exist in the movie if we weren't going to directly reference it?
Yeah, I mean, 10 hours later, we throw the ring in the volcano, but it took a long time to get there. You could see Agatha pulling at all right, so you did that and you realized you started to have the magic, but that would have probably died on the vine, but then Hydra brought you in here and made you touch the Mind Stone. Okay, that amplified what otherwise wouldn't have happened. Now I can see how your grief's influencing this. And she's like, I give up. Why in the heck are you able to do all this powerful magic? I can't get it. Then she says, I wrote down the quote, I know what you are. You have no idea how dangerous you are. You're supposed to be a myth, a being capable of spontaneous creation. Here you are using it to make breakfast for dinner. This is chaos magic, Wanda. That makes you the Scarlet Witch.
Which is great because half of that applies to us in the fourth wall break. You're something that shouldn't exist. That's hilarious because it was previously owned by another company. Another wall break.
Yeah, and then, unfortunately, they give Pietro a backstory, a character name in the town, and a completely open and shut explanation for why he existed but wasn't her brother from the MCU, and throw away all that cross X-Men universe.
So it's disappointing, but I understand why they did it, because if we want to get super technical, the Maximoff twins are the children of Magneto, like the main antagonist in all of the X-Men movies. So it's really hard to kind of tie that in at this point in the game. So we'll see how they figure that out.
All right. So 8 episodes have gone by. We've established the conflict. We've established the players. And now it's time for the Clash of Titans. Episode 9, the series finale.
I love how it's called that, like the series finale. It's like, and then my wife asks, like, is this the end of the WandaVision series? I'm like, it could be.
It's just a TV
reference. It could be both. It could be the end of the series that was fake in the show, or it could be the end of the show, or it could be both of those things. Who knows?
So, part of this, like you said, turns into a whooshing, punching, laser fight. But not all of it.
The reconciliation between Vision and White Vision, that's the best. That is the best way
I loved it.
Could have ended.
I loved it. So they spent their time, they had to scratch the itch of flying around, Vision versus Vision, flying through the clouds and crashing through buildings and lasering each other and flying through each other. And
so if you had two robots that could phase through reality, had super powerful lasers, and were made of an indestructible metal fighting for half an hour, what would it look like? And then, like you said, scratch that itch. Now, how does this actually get resolved with two artificial intelligences talking to each other?
So what do we call the White Vision? What is he? Does he have a comic book name?
White Vision.
Okay, so White Vision says, my programming directive is to destroy the Vision. And then, I guess, the other not real Vision says, but I'm not the true Vision, only a conditional Vision. And he looks like he's getting ready to throw punches. They charge up their lasers, and then the Vision is kind of like, wait a minute, I request elaboration.
Yes. It's like, yes, this is exactly how I want this to go.
Yes. Oh, I inside I was like, yes. And then they brought up the philosophical debate that dates back over 2,500 years called the Ship of Theseus.
Yes.
Are you familiar with this philosophical debate?
I am. If you have the ship Theseus and it's sailing around the world and parts wear out, and as you eventually replace all the parts, you get to a destination and the ship has not a single original part on it, is it still the ship Theseus?
And you can argue either one. This dates back to Plato and Aristotle in ancient Greece. And there's other versions of it out there. Like if you have a thing in a museum and you go in and take one piece and replace it, at what point, is it still the same thing, or is the thing you took out it, or whatever? It's a great question, and because you can't really neatly solve it. And they don't bore us with this debate, and they kind of cut back and forth to it. But in the end, the new Vision says neither is the true ship. Both are the true ship. So it's the Schrodinger's cat of philosophical
artificial
ships.
Robot, I've trapped you in a logical conundrum. And let's take a second to appreciate that these two were having this philosophical debate about the existence of the other one and whether they should destroy each other while floating in a perfect circle, mirror imaged in a library.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. That was probably for me. That was the high point of the whole series, was two Visions debating the Ship of Theseus in a library.
So that also goes back to a whole. I'm not going to get into it, but there's a whole storyline called Vision Quest that was in the old Avengers comics in the 1980s that talks about the original Vision getting stripped down to parts, building a new version called White Vision. He didn't have the original memories, and they could never give him the original memories of the Vision. Like, it's a whole thing, but. They just...
Okay. They obviously were hinting at that when Vision tried to give him some original memories.
Yes, and it looked like apparently he did. So now we have White Vision that is, and he said that, like, I am the Vision, and then he flew off. So now, canon in the Marvel Universe, we still get to have Vision.
And all of our subplots are starting to wrap up. Vision's starting to recognize who he is in this universe, and the other Vision gets his purpose. Hayward is coming for his reckoning. But our protagonist is really Wanda, and she's the one that eventually has to come to terms with her grief of all of her loss and the unfortunate things that have happened to her in her life. And this culminates with her basically having to choose between this fake world she's set up where all of her problems have been solved, or the real world where things are still kind of messy and not great. And I found this so compelling.
And they built it in such a great way because, like, it is. Her perfect life is completely conditional on her living the lie. Because if she tears down the fake world, Vision goes away, her kids go away, which she shows genuine affection for. Like, she can't, it's not a halfway thing. Either you accept reality or you completely reject it, and there is no middle ground.
And the stakes were high here. I mean, she was holding an entire town of people hostage, and she had to let go of that in order to accept reality and just realize that her fake world was hurting other people.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is a false dichotomy with her insane power. She probably could have had a house that was just hers, or maybe recreated this town with.
Why am I not surprised you just said that?
Why, she could have done this with fake people in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, or the mythical land of Wyoming. But it's fine. We don't have to talk about it.
Yeah. Now Wu gets a chance to shine, and he kind of steps up and helps wrap up some of those plot threads. But eventually Wanda shows her value, and any good hero does. She doesn't just win because she can make bigger red lightning bolts than the girl who's making the purple lightning bolts. She recognizes that she does have the power of witchcraft, that she'd gotten it without knowing what it was, but there's something for her to learn there, and she quickly learns and uses the thing that Agatha used against her on Agatha and turns the tables and saves
which
the day.
Another trope it's such a trope it's almost painful, where the bad guy explained, "Oh, I turned off all of your powers with these pictures on the wall. Let's take a second to appreciate and memorize each one in detail before we move on to the next plot point." Bad guys, burgeoning supervillains. If you have the upper hand over the superhero, don't ever tell him how you got it. Just accept that you have it.
Okay, but as we've established on the Bad at Magic podcast, we analyze the magic system, and this was them teaching us the rules of the magic system and then following the rules in the resolution of the conflict so that they earned the resolution.
I don't know. This felt like introducing something new at the 11th hour. This is a way that you can beat me at my own game in the next episode. Make sure you mark it down in your notebook.
So Agatha introduces, this is where she kind of fleshes out the idea of the prophecy, and this is the part that floored me the most. This is the one that felt like it had the biggest implications for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know we're way over time here, but I want to take a second for this. She's like, well, here is the Darkhold, the Book of the Damned. It has an entire chapter about you, the Scarlet Witch. You were born. No, you were not born. You were forged. You have no coven, no need for incantation. Your power exceeds that of the Sorcerer Supreme, and your destiny is to destroy the world. And I was like,
audible gasp. Hey, of course that prophecy exists, that she's horrendously powerful.
Does that make Wanda the next Infinity Gauntlet? Like, is Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe the fulfillment of this prophecy that is Chekhov's gun now?
Ben, if we had like 4 hours, I don't think I could list the universe-ending things that happen in the Marvel Universe every single issue.
I get it, but we're not talking about the comic books. This is now canon.
Well, the comic books, to me, are canon, sir. Not in the MCU, but this is just one in a laundry list of things that could potentially destroy all of everything everywhere. I mean, you just have that floating in the background somewhere.
I don't think so. I can't think of a single other thing in the most recent entries in the MCU where they're transitioning from Phase 3 to Phase 4 that feel this consequential. A prophecy stated very explicitly that Wanda has an identity and a destiny to uphold, just like in Ragnarok where they talked about the destruction of Asgard.
So what you're saying is that Phase 50 of the MCU, or whenever they decide they've milked it for all the money that it's worth, that the Scarlet Witch, which will be Elizabeth Olsen's clone 100 years from now, will actually destroy the planet Earth in a movie?
Nope, Phase 4. That's my prediction.
The next phase. They're just going to torch the whole dang thing. Burn it down. Oh, please.
Yep.
Dude, we haven't even talked about Crisis of Infinite Earths. We haven't talked about Secret Invasion. We haven't talked about House of M.
Yeah,
we haven't talked
those are all
about
things you know about from the comic books. They've been cherry picking their conflicts, and they hinted at them in the mid and post credit end scenes. There hasn't been anything else of this magnitude. This is the one they're hinting at in the post and mid credit end scene.
The existence of the Skrulls implies such a huge and rich amount of storytelling that there was a whole part of the Marvel universe where the Skrulls were secretly, slowly, methodically, and systematically, I probably said that again, replacing key people across the planet Earth with shapeshifters until they controlled the freaking planet. This includes members of the Avengers. They had super scrolls that they embedded with superpowers until everybody was questioning who's who.
Well, they did have a scroll pop up at the end of this, but all they did was have whatever her name is, Monica Rambeau, fly off.
But this is what I'm saying. Just the fact that the Skrulls exist as a thing in the MCU hints at the possibility of the secret invasion where the Skrulls decide, you know what, this is our planet now.
They gave Agatha Harkness like a 2-minute speech about Wanda's destiny. I'm telling you, man, this is it. This is the conflict of Phase 4.
All right, maybe. I'm gonna keep the jury out in my own mind until we see more about Doctor Strange's TV show.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That's the next one coming up. Is the Infinite Multiverse of Sadness, or I forget what it's called. The next Doctor Strange movie. That, yes, I was mixing it up with I think a title of an album.
Or maybe you're just 90s. Sad. Are you sad, Ben? Do we need to talk about your feelings?
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to go to wrap this up. So we've gone through this journey with Wanda, but even though we're talking about superheroes with otherworldly powers, at the heart of it, it's just a woman that's lived a life where she's had some tragic things happen to her and she's had trouble coping with it. And we can relate to that.
Brandon Sanderson talks about this all the time. You could have the most ginormous, amazing plot lines, but if we don't care about the characters, we're not going to be into it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate to what it's like to fly through the clouds and have someone whoosh a purple lightning bolt at me, but grief, I can relate to that.
If I had the ability to stop the pain or to live a lie, to live a fantasy of my ideal existence,
just not deal with it.
Everybody has felt that. It's like, man, I wish I could just wrap myself in fakeness and live there.
Yeah. And then a long, emotional, well-earned wrap-up, reminiscent of like the end of Lord of the Rings, just everybody hugging and saying farewell. And I teared up, man. I got to be honest, I did.
I did too. I did too a little bit. My wife was making fun of me. I kept it in because my wife was making fun of me. But like when they were tucking the kids into bed and the parents had that eye contact moment where we're just not going to tell them that they're going to cease to exist in a few minutes, like that's... Like as a parent now, like I feel like I could imagine myself in that scenario, and that would be just the worst.
And that's the reality of it, like it wasn't just, she was giving up on this entire alternate life to face her grief.
To her, these were her kids, and she didn't want to freak them out because she's a good parent, and so she just tucked them into bed and told them that she was proud of them. Just like any other day, to protect them from the reality that they're going away forever.
And then there was the end credits cutscene, which was Wanda in some secret cabin, floating like Doctor Strange, reading the Necronomicon or whatever it's called, the Darkhold.
Because we need a more informed, stronger Wanda now.
Right. Oh, I'm a witch and I could get better at this by studying a book. Okay, I'll do it.
And they say like, oh, you're supposed to be more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme. Man, there's a lot of comic book lore about the Sorcerer Supreme that says otherwise, but I guess we'll see where it goes.
Oh, really? This was non-canonical interpretation of the prophecies that Agatha Harkness was
I have not
giving?
Personally ever read a line that said that Wanda was more powerful than Stephen Strange, but I have personally read a lot of lines that show Stephen Strange being like power levels beyond comprehension.
All right. Well, I'm giving this 2 thumbs up. It was worth it. I loved it. It really pulled me in, and it felt like a worthy entry. It really scratched the itch I felt like in this COVID movie drought that we've been having I'm ready to move on to phase 4 of the MCU.
If you are a hardcore comic book nerd, or if you love the MCU and the continuity that they've been doing, or if you are like a hardcore movie critic and buff and are interested in seeing a unique take on storytelling that we have never seen before,
nothing like it.
And they did it so well, and it fits so perfectly into the story that they were telling. I will beat this drum until I'm dead. Is this storyline would not have worked as a feature-length film. The information they needed to impart and the way that they imparted it, they just understood the format that they had, and they leveraged it so perfectly to tell the story the way that it should have been told.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It was fantastic. All right. 2 thumbs up. Bad Magic Podcast recommends WandaVision. Check it out. We just spoiled the heck out of it, so hopefully you watch it and you agree. If you disagree, check out our social media. Speaking of social media, next time Josh and I are going to talk about the book that won the vote on our subreddit, which is Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody. It's a short read, so if you want to read it before next time, just give it a read or a listen, and we will discuss that book next time. If you want to join in on the discussion, if you want to weigh in on the debate about WandaVision or any things we talked about in this episode, you can go to our Facebook page, Bad at Magic, or our subreddit, reddit.r/Bad at Magic. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Bad at Magic.
If you like what we do and you can't get enough of us, please tell a friend. If you want us to never stop and you just want all the ways to express love to us, then consider becoming a patron on our Patreon, like Ben just said, or bonus points to everybody that sends Ben a solicitation for podcast advertising.